then cross-examined the witness regarding, did you consider Eddie Smith to be in the circle? Did you know that Alex was spending $50,000 per week supporting a drug habit, presumably through Eddie Smith? The court conducted a pretrial, a hearing outside the presence of the jury, addressed the issue, made it clear that the roadside shooting was a bridge too far. Then the defense decided to build a road over that bridge, decided to just go right there as if they could dance through fire without getting burned, scarred, or anything. The door was open.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being patient with me. Happy, what is it, Thursday? It's Thursday. It's Thursday. Happy Thursday. So, you guys got a little preview. Wasn't that a little fun? I like putting that together. That was a little bit interesting, just being able to take a look at some of the more exciting moments. But what we're going to do is, for this lovely Thursday stream, doing a little bit of recap on the Murdaugh trial. The trial that has begun, the trial within the trial, the trialception of the century. We are going to go ahead and see where we are. And here's where we're going to start. So the place we're going to start is going to be with, well, you know what? Since this is a murder trial, why don't we start with the murder? We're going to start with that. We're going to start with the first witness that appeared today on behalf of the state. It was the reconstruction expert. And why is the name evading me? Why are my notes not pulled up? Because my notes aren't pulled up. Because that's what happens when you don't have your notes pulled up, when you're panicking because you're making a really cool intro video. It's just one of those things. These are the things that we do when we're trying to figure out how to manage all the fun stuff that we've got going. So we had some fireworks in the morning. Well, not really fireworks. They were more just arguments, kind of individuals preserving everything going on in the case. And it was Mr. Kinsey. Yeah, that's right. It was Mr. Kinsey. Kevin Kinsey, I think was his name. Anyways, he was the state reconstruction expert. And before we go into too much of this, what I want to do is pull up a little bit of the scene images that we have to give some context to what Mr. Kinsey is saying. Now, this is something that it's been driving me nuts throughout this entire trial, that there's not a lot of context given behind what's being testified to, because the jurors aren't allowed to take notes, and because we have the prosecution that's going left, right, center, up, down, every which way, whether it's finances, motivation, bad man lies, or just all the stuff. So Mr. Kinsey takes the stand, but what he testifies to is a lot of the accident reconstruction. Professor Kinsey, Dr. Chief Professor Kinsey. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Misty Marks. Very much appreciated for that. Surprising that essentially we don't have anyone giving overarching commentary at the beginning of this, or the jury doesn't have notes, or there isn't a placard in front of the jury that kind of puts the scene back into play every time one of these witnesses takes the stand. Because why would we do that? Why would we want to make it easier for the jury to make a decision on a murder trial? I don't know. It's not my trial. It has confused the ever-living wildness out of me that we don't have a lot of this stuff laid out. So let's go ahead and see if we can't give a little bit of context here. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see if we've got our images. We do. And make sure we don't have the ones we don't want selected. We got the property, we got all the panes, the windows, and everything else. So go ahead and do this. And then we share the screen. Because we've got some stuff to cover. All right. So here are some of the images that were introduced as exhibits in the case. Before we get to Professor Kinsey, I do want to get to Professor Kinsey, but I want you guys to have an understanding of what we're talking about here, because that's the thing. Professor Kinsey's testimony is going to be something that's going to be a linchpin of the prosecution's case. And the defense is going to use the testimony as well. But what we need before we go into that is we actually need a little bit of background. We need some background. And before I start flipping through these photos, I do want to ask that anyone that's watching, if you guys are here for the first time, please, or if you're here for the repeat time, hit the like button. Please like the video. It takes 2 seconds, but it does help drive content, or it helps drive people to watch this. And I think that we're going to go over some pretty cool stuff. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please go ahead and do this. So let's see here. These are the kennels that are down by the property, at the bottom of the property. So this is where a lot of this stuff is taking place. It's a nice kennel setup, to be quite honest. And this is where we're going to focus a great deal of our attention. The great deal of our attention is going to be focused right about here. This is the feed room, which is next to more of these kennels. Feed room essentially, and what you are seeing there. So all of this is going to be a little trigger warning, because there is going to be stuff in here that's going to be kind of graphic in nature. So if you guys aren't comfortable with that, that's fine. You can choose not to be here, but I am going to go through some of this stuff because it's ballistics and it's really important to this case. So what you see here is kind of the last lying area of Paul Murdaugh. This is the feed room that, as it was seen and pictured on the night of the murder. And this is essentially where everything is taking place. So when Professor Kinsey is testifying, I want you guys to imagine that this is what he's speaking about. I can't pull up 2 videos at once or 2 screens at once, but please keep this in your minds. So that's that. This is the actual one of the feed. This is the feed room itself, with the door open a little bit more. You can see the glass panes in the background. The glass pane is essentially where the first shot had gone through the arm and essentially busted out through that back window. You can see the little bullet hole right there, a little shot hole right there. Back to the kennels. More pictures of sled. This is the overhang on the other side. This is kind of a grand overview of where we're looking. More images of the kennels. And we're going to come back to this one. This is essentially the layout that we're operating off of, the shot, where the shots take place, where the evidence is found, and where all of these things are said to have occurred. Okay. So going back to give you guys context, here's where we are. And if I jump forward to this image, this is that little storage room that we're talking about with the window in the back. All right. Hopefully that helps, because honestly, it helps me. It doesn't. I don't know why the prosecution hasn't done it throughout the trial. Bring up the image, at least as a background. Have one demonstrative exhibit that all of them testify based off what you're allowed to do. So yeah. So, and then there's the window pane. And what you'll see here is the various defects that are in the trial. The defects are in the window. That's at the back of. That's at the back of. That's at the back of this shed. So there's the window with the shot pellets. Okay. So do we have our context? Do we feel comfortable with where we are? Imagine the scene as it is, because this is kind of important, especially for this particular witness. All right. Without much further ado, let's go ahead and jump into Professor Kinsey. I'm not going to go through his background. He's essentially a very experienced law enforcement officer, did scene reconstruction, has done some blood spatter stuff, has done a bunch of other stuff in various cases. His history and his case knowledge is pretty substantial, so I'm not going to really dispute a lot of his qualifications in this regard. And actually, the defense uses a lot of his own statements, I think, to try and make their own case seem a little more plausible. Let's go right to this video. Let's see, Murdaugh. Here we go. Oh, what an unfortunate freeze frame. We've got Alex yawning, and we've got Professor Kinsey starting to say. Chris Mullen, thank you very much. But wait, there's more, as the prosecution said. Prosecution has been doing a whole lot of that recently. It's been rather frustrating. Prosecution's a GTA cheat code. It is. Thank you for the super chat, 9-inch nail scowl. Creighton, we're going to get the Creighton on the floor today was the highlight for me. Yeah, the lawyer yoga, courtroom yoga, really confusing. But let's go ahead and get into some of his testimony so we can start recapping it, okay? Let me know if you can't hear it. I do have closed captioning on, so you can see it. For those of you that have difficulty hearing it, let's go ahead and see.
Law enforcement laboratories. I also examined extensively photographs that were taken on the scene, measurements, that kind of thing. And I also responded to the scene. It was rather close, and I took my own measurements.
When you say responded to the scene, when did you first get involved in this guy?
The end of 2022, and I'm not talking about when the scene was actually going on. I went after the fact and did my own measurements.
All right. And when you were retained by the state in this case, were you told any particular goal, or were you told to just take a fresh look at it and offer your opinions?
I was told to look at all of the evidence and determine what I may be helpful on, and to use my own judgment objectively, independently, and come up with my own conclusions.
All right, let's talk about, if we can, and again, we're going to have to deal with some of, maybe not the images as much, but deal with some of the injuries that Maggie and Paul suffered, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's, if you could, just remind the jury, what were the injuries that Paul suffered, please?
They were very, very severe firearms injuries. One was a shotgun wound to just a little anatomical left of the midline of the body. One was to the shoulder, and it proceeded into the jaw and ultimately into the head.
And was that the first injury or the second?
The first injury was the shotgun wound to the middle of the chest, and it was non-fatal,
Right.
at least not fatal immediately.
And then what about the second injury?
The second injury was immediate death.
And were you able, in reviewing the crime scene evidence, to come to any conclusions as to the order in which Paul suffered those gunshot wounds from the shooter?
Kind of a dumb question. First shot was the one of the chest. The second shot was the fatal one. Were we able to come to a conclusion? Oh, well, Creighton scripts his questions. So do other attorneys.
Yes, sir, I was.
All right, and please relate that to the jury.
My conclusion was that the first non-fatal wound to the midline of the body occurred as Paul was standing with his body canted in the middle of that dog food room, pointed slightly southwest, and the shot entered the midline of his chest, exited his underarm, entered his underarm on the actual arm, and exited the outside of his arm. And most of those 9 pellets proceeded through the back window of that dog food room.
All right. Here's our first stopping point, and here's where I'm going to bring up the image that we had before. What you heard him just testify to. And I'm sorry if this sounds repetitive, guys, but what drove me nuts was that you can't see what he's talking about while we're talking about this stuff. And that's exceedingly frustrating. And why did I get rid of my freaking images when I had them on the screen? Because we know how to do this. We're professionals. That's exactly why I got rid of the images that I needed. Oh, Rob, come on, bud. You can do this. Let's see. And we're going to make this easier. We're actually going to convert it to an image I can pull up a slideshow. Give me one moment, guys. I'm sorry. One moment, please. Bear with me. I promise it's worth it. I promise it's worth it. Okay, while I do that, we're going to do this. So he just testified that Paul began inside this feed room. So he was inside this feed room when he took the first shot. That was the one to the chest. Okay, so he's inside the feed room, and in order for him to take that shot, he is facing towards the outside of the feed room. So he is at this point either exiting the feed room or he's been backed into this location, but his back is towards that window. His chest is facing outward. There you go. That's some more context. Make sense? Makes sense. And that's also why you end up with the shots to the glass that was just described. All right. So now we're back in the context. We have a visual. We understand what he's talking about. And there's our directionality. He's walking out of the feed room where he takes the first shot in the feed room. That's where the first shot is. Second shot, fatal, takes place out of the feed room. Okay. So let's get back to what he's talking about, which requires me to pull up the video.
Right. And then just real quick, you said 9 pellets. So explain that to the jury why you say 9 pellets.
That double-aught buckshot shot shell contains 9 pellets and I guess you describe it as a styrofoam packing to keep it tight so it doesn't shake. And when that cartridge is expelled out of the end of that barrel, the styrofoam packing dissipates or goes its own way, and those projectiles continue in the correct path.
And hold on for me real quick. I want to get a couple things marked.
See, I'm not the only one that needs time. Come on, Creighton.
All right, I'm going to show you, can I have the Elmo, please? I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 531, 532, and 533, and see if you recognize these particular images.
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, and tell the jury just generally what these are, please.
These are views of the floor of the feed room and a view from the entrance to the feed room and some digitally placed legs that I place in there to show Paul's approximate position in that feed room at the time of the shooting.
Your Honor, at this time I'd offer states 531, 532, and 533, I believe without objection. Yes, Your Honor.
There, did it.
All right, I'm going to put 531 up on the screen here. Make sure we can see it all right. All right, Dr. Kinsey, you were talking a little bit about Paul's positioning and his location when that first shot happened. And if you could tell the jury your conclusion as to where he was located when that shot was fired. And then if you want to step down, and if you could maybe point out what was added to this image to kind of reflect your conclusion in that regard.
Side note, how creepy are those legs? Those are AI. Those are like, they are inserted legs. Now, these photos leaked prior to the trial beginning. And everyone was kind of going, what's with the naked legs in the back? They're legs that are added. It messed with me too. So, but this is kind of what the prosecution's case is, that Paul is inside the feed room, and those are the approximated position of his legs when that first shot, which comes at about 90 degrees perpendicular to his body, hits.
Thank you.
And there's a dowel stick right behind you if you want to use that.
I have to go to 1.5.
Okay, as you see here, those are the digital legs that I placed there showing Paul's approximate position as he was standing when he had the first gunshot wound. Here along the floor, what you see are passive or 90-degree blood droplets. And when blood, you can tell a lot from the direction of blood by the way it strikes an object. Blood has a cohesive factor. It's viscous. And you probably heard that term before with the motor oil for your car. It's thicker than water. And the thing that causes that blood droplet to change shape is the friction and the direction and how much force was used. Well, a 90-degree drop just is exactly that. It's perpendicular to the ground. So these 90-degree drops right here tell me that Paul was standing there for a moment. Can't tell you how long, but those drops were running down from that wound on his arm, more than likely his arm, because his chest area had a shirt on it. It takes a little while for that blood to make it through the shirt, but it'll run down the outside of your arm and drip off your fingers. And you can see these 90-degree droplets here, and then they actually lead to the door. You can follow the path to the door. He's not moving very fast because most of them are almost perfectly circular or 90 degrees. Had he been moving real fast, you could see some directionality in him, a tail, because the tail always tells you the direction with a blood drop. So I know he was moving slowly, and I know he was standing in the middle of this room for some time after the first shotgun wound.
All right, and approximately how far was Paul inside the feed room? Can you describe a little bit about the dimensions of the feed room and your conclusion as to how far within the room Paul was when he was struck by that first blast?
Yes, sir. Well, the feed room is 10 foot deep by my own calculations and by looking at the other sketches. And where you see his feet here is just on the other side of the halfway point. So I went, I'm guessing because I have no way of running a tape measure, because when I went there, everything was moved. But this door is 36 inches and it's approximately 1.5 foot, 2 foot past the door. So that's how I come up with that determination. And he's just on the other side of the midpoint of that 10-foot room.
Which is about how far from the doorway?
5 foot.
All right. And I'm going to show you what's been marked as 534, stage 534. Did you recognize that?
I do. Yes, sir.
All right. And tell the jury what that is real quick.
That is a general view from outside the feed room that was taken at the time the crime scene was originally processed. And I added a digital enhanced arrow showing the reader or the viewer the direction of the shot path.
All right. This time I'll offer stage 534.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to put 534 up on the screen, and if you would, just show that arrow that you're talking about that's been added to this image.
Yes, sir. Right here.
All right. And then, as well, just show generally where those blood spots are. It's not the best image in the world, but where those blood spots are that led to your conclusion about Paul's location within the feed room when the first blast struck him.
The placard hasn't been moved, although it's hard to see the droplets. And of course, I didn't add the legs to this, but just on the other side of that placard. And then you have here a quantity of 90-degree blood droplets with a partial footwear impression in it. And then you can follow the blood droplets to the door.
Going back to stage 531, again, point out to the jury, if you would, the sort of the digitally added feet that you had added.
All right, hang on. I'm going to fast forward to a little bit more because I want to get to this second shot before I get to cross. Because we are going to be talking quite a bit about what happened towards the end of the day. So let's talk about the second shot. Door frame. There we go. Here we go.
And tell the jury what this particular image reflects, please.
Yes, sir. If you can look at the green funnel that I've added just visually, if you look at that green funnel, that is approximately the shot shell path, the shot path from the shot shell after.
All right. Here you go. So, yes, Creighton at that speed is a voice changer. I understand that, but we have a lot to get through. It's at 1.25. I will slow it down when I get to more relevant parts. This right here is essentially the pivotal piece of evidence. So you have two pieces of evidence brought in by this person. One, the person first shot, Paul is standing in the feed room, kind of askew to the door, a little bit sideways, but he's inside the feed room clearly. Second fact that comes out of this is that Paul is standing for a period of time. The blood droplets are dropping straight down for a period, almost no trajectory point to the blood, which means he's standing there for a moment and starts to meander out towards the door. So he starts to move towards the front of the door. And then the second shot that hits him is from right there. Now, what he testifies to is that the ejector port on the shotgun is in front of that door frame so that the shell would eject into the feed room. That's what he testifies to. But I want you to look at the angle. The angle is the part that Mr. Harpootlian is going to focus on in the cross-examination. And I want you to kind of look at the door where it's sitting and imagine that there's someone who's kind of standing there by the door, mostly inside, but standing there by the door, who's basically standing there after having been shot once, hand is down, and then second shot comes, and we know that it comes from the side of his body, so like a profile shot. So let's go ahead and listen to what he has to say.
After it did the injuries to Paul or the direction of the shot from the shot shell. And I determined that by shot shell pellet defects that are still in the door, even though the door had been cleaned. I went and looked at it myself, run my own measurements, took the width of the door. I took Paul's approximate height. It's listed as several different things. DMV shows him at 5'6". The pathologist listed him, I believe, at 5'9". So I had to split the difference. I went somewhere in the middle. Then I deducted the distance between the top of your head and the top of your shoulder. So I took another foot off. Then I took the width of the door, and there's one other thing I looked at, and that was a void pattern that's on the door frame of the door. A void pattern is caused by something being there when the blood and biological materials are let, we call it a bloodletting from the wound, and there's a void pattern, which tells me something was in that way, and because of the narrow door, in my opinion, it was Paul. So that's what caused that void pattern on that door. So I used all of that, and I used a dowel rod, and I used a protractor on the doorknob side of that door frame, and I ran it up, and that's what helped me establish the angle of that shot pattern.
All right, and we're going to use the images to kind of talk about that a little bit more specifically, but quickly, I want to show you 539 and 540 and see if you recognize these images.
Mr. Kinsley is so much easier to listen to at 1.25 than Creighton Waters. And I'm sorry for that, guys. It's just one of those things. But these images are kind of important. So hopefully Mr. Waters allows this witness to testify. He did a pretty good job in letting this witness go.
Pellet defects in the door, and this is the approximate center of it here. So that's 4 inches above 72. That's approximately 76 inches on an 80-inch door.
I'm going to show you states 536 and explain to the jury what this is, and in particular how that's relevant to your conclusion about the angle in which Paul suffered the fatal head wound.
This is the original crime scene pictures. And this is where the pellets took their path. This is where they struck and did damage to the door. And you can actually still see the dents that are documented in my photograph. You can see them in the original crime scene. This is the concentration of blood that's caused by the brain exiting Paul's body in the path of the shot shells. And then you also have biological material, hair and blood, here at the top of the door frame. And that's where I drew my conclusion. At some time, those body parts made contact with these sections of the door. And my opinion is that it hit here, and then landed on the sidewalk.
Looking at states 537, can you explain what the jury's seeing in this image and how it relates to your opinion about the manner in which Paul suffered that fatal wound?
I can. With a major bloodletting, especially.
Dr. Kinsey, let me ask you to, I'm going to move this podium and ask you to step back just a hair so that the jurors over here can see what you're saying.
Yes, sir. With a shotgun wound, you've got you've got over 800 pellets that are making damage. It's not like a single projectile from a pistol or a rifle. So there's mass damage, and it throws body fluids and blood in several different directions, but they follow the path. When I mentioned that it was a void pattern, this is the last blood drop. You can see it in the photograph that I can see, and it's approximately 5 foot right there. And this is not green tape. That is a digital effect I put on the photograph to show the void I was talking about. So at some time, it's my opinion that Paul was up against that door or real close to that door to keep that blood from striking the door at the point in time that he was shot.
All right, and the green tape reflects that blood pad or that void area that is consistent with Paul blocking that area. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Digital tape. It's not really tape.
All right.
Yes, sir.
And so that's been added to.
Yes, sir.
Okay. To illustrate your opinion. Correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then 538. I'm going to show you this image, and again, if you can point out what's been added and how this relates to the conclusion that you're offering to the jury.
Yes, sir. One thing that I looked at to determine that it happened in the doorway and a little bit outside the doorway, more outside than inside, you don't just look for the presence of biological material in blood. You look for the absence of biological material in blood. Here at the top, it didn't have a scale or a ruler, so I can't tell you exactly, but looking at some of these other objects, I was able to scale it approximately 4 inches up here. You have a void.
So this is all going to the angle. We'll fast forward through a bit of this. But basically, it's kind of what I said. He ends up saying that the person is about 2 to 4 feet away, 2 to 3 feet away when he takes that final shot. 2 to 3 feet away.
He's going down.
So here's the thing. 2 to 3 feet away. 2 to 3 feet away at that angle. I want you to remember that. At that angle, that steep angle, the muzzle being 2 to 3 feet away from where it makes contact with Paul's shoulder. Paul is 5 foot. His driver's license says 5'6". The ME measured him at 5'9". We're going to call him 5'8". just to average it out, right? So that he's 5'8". That's the trajectory of the shot. And then you add 2 feet down in that trajectory, 3 feet down in that trajectory. And then you basically have a firearm that's almost on the ground based on his proximity. And I'll explain to you how I think the prosecutor can make the case and how I think the defense can make the case in just a minute as soon as we get through the rest of his explanation. Sorry for shaking. I just bumped my monitor. That's awesome.
Going down, on the sidewalk in front of him. And it would be different than just free pouring blood. You would see this pattern, and you would see those high velocity blood droplets there on the ground. And plus the shooter would have to be on the roof to shoot down into him, but you wouldn't have this on the door.
In your expert opinion, did you see any support or evidence in this crime scene that could support that the injuries suffered by Paul were in any manner a suicide or self-inflicted?
I don't see the possibility, knowing that it's not a contact shotgun wound, and I'm fairly strong, and I'm bigger than Paul was, and I don't know of any way you could hold that shotgun out and shoot yourself in that direction at that angle and put that biological.
Look at his hands. There. Right there. That angle. Look at his hands. So if the shotgun is 3 feet long, that's essentially the angle he's looking at, and he's about 6 foot, 6'2", something like that. Keep an eye on that angle.
Material on top of that door like that. I don't think it's possible.
All right, thank you. All right, I hate keep sending you back and forth, but I'm going to send you back one more time.
Creighton, we don't believe that you hate sending him back and forth. Let's go forward to a little bit, because the testimony with Maggie wasn't really the best, but let's get to some courtroom yoga, because we need a break from some of the dark stuff.
Always goes in a straight line.
And then when you're pressing the dial stick there, you're showing the trajectory of the wound, not implying that was a contact wound.
No, sir, I'm not. I'm not implying it's
Nope. Still talking about Paul. There we go. Why are lawyers getting on the floor?
You come behind me?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Right here. The shooter was right here, approximately right here.
All right. And show us the trajectory as it went through.
For those of you who are confused, when the ME was testifying, when the medical examiner was testifying to how it could have gone through the breast of Maggie and into the skull, this is how it's being described. So this is what the ME couldn't re-portray with a yardstick or something like that. So this is essentially the image or the positioning, as the prosecution sees it, of the shooter for Maggie during that last shot. If you guys are confused, go to this one. So the shooter has repositioned around, and based on the shells, you're going to see, or based on the cartridges, you're going to see that the shooter kind of did an arcing path, as gets testified to, arcing path to the point where they're behind Maggie as she is falling back towards the shed. And the last shot, the fatal shot, comes through in this angle. Okay, so this hopefully starts making sense to people. I'm not doing this to try and be extra graphic. What I'm doing this for is because none of these witnesses have been able to put all of this together. And it's one of those things where the prosecutor really needs to try and figure out how to give this visual an explanation with all of these different things lining up in this particular way. They need to be able to do the demonstrative of where the shooter would have been positioned based on the medical examiner and the crime reconstruction, the scene reconstruction expert. And then they have to also have the map there. So they have to explain it in the way that hopefully in the way a little bit better than I'm explaining it to you now. I had 15 minutes, 20 minutes to put this together. So hopefully this makes sense. Did I walk through my house with a prop? Did I walk through my house with a prop to see how I could position or get angles? Maybe. Is this Purple Heart that's about 3 feet? Yes, it is. Did I walk through my house kind of walking around a doorway and seeing how I could move from areas? I absolutely did. And I did that mostly for what we're going to get to with Dick Harpootlian. But this one is kind of, it's just the last. I just didn't really want to show Creighton very much right now, but his little, what is this? The child's pose on the courtroom floor. He's relaxing for a moment. Good. He started the day with a cup of coffee in his hand when he was cross-examining or examining witnesses. So we've got him chilling out. Okay. So that's the end of his direct. Let's go. And there's more on direct, but honestly, it's a lot of leading. It's a lot of this other stuff. The main points we got were kind of what we have here. Let's get to Mr. Harpootlian, who takes over beginning cross-examination right about here after this little break. More pictures, at least we're using the pictures. Here we are. Hang on. I want to get to this start because it's kind of funny. Slow this down at one time because it's kind of funny to hear. Okay. Oh my gosh. I yeeted myself and I left the damn image up, didn't I? I didn't even get us to the point where we needed to get to. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? You guys didn't hear any of the beginning. I didn't yeet myself. I just was an idiot. That was so cool. Now we got to replay it again. My gosh. Mic, Elaine. Microphone, Elaine. Oh, we can do these things, people. Yes, thank you. Yeah, did that too. No pic. Yep, did that too. My gosh, guys. I just. Thanks, Sarah. That makes me feel good. And an S at the same time. Yep, true.
So do I call you doctor or deputy or chief or what?
I haven't been a deputy in about 25 years, Mr. Harpootlian, but I'll answer to whatever you call me, sir.
You may regret that. So, when did you start in law enforcement?
Around 93.
Okay. And you were in Orangeburg?
Yes, sir.
You know, back then, I was a solicitor in the Fifth Circuit. I was the prosecutor there. Do you remember that?
I've testified for you a couple times, Mr. Harpootlian.
I thought you looked familiar. So you actually were my witness a couple times.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I don't know if we're going to have much to dispute today, but.
So the colloquial stuff works a little bit here and there. It gets a little laugh out of the gallery. The whole, you can call me whatever you want, a little back and forth. This stuff happens in a courtroom. It kind of happens naturally. Yes, we're talking about some serious stuff, but it does end up happening because the jurors have been there for 19, well, law and crime says 17. I think this is day, what's the title of the stream? Day 19? Because I think I started when the jury count started. Yeah, day 19. So 19 days in, the jury is going to laugh a little bit. Yep, har, har, har. I get it. Why are the jurors not allowed to take notes? This varies by jurisdiction and sometimes by judge within the jurisdiction. For some reason, these jurors are not allowed to take notes, which I think the prosecutor really should have thought about a lot before thinking about how hard they want to push on some of these secondary matters. So this gets kind of complicated because the prosecutor wants a lot of the secondary stuff in. But by doing that, when you have a jury that's not taking notes, they can't remember certain things. For example, like this, the concept of how much a pill would cost based on the dollar figure that they hear, or the timing of the shots, or the location that everyone's standing. They can't remember these things. So the more information the prosecution throws at them, the harder it is for them to remember back to the information, the testimony they actually heard. And they don't get to come back and watch video of the testimony. They have to rely on their memory of the testimony, which makes closing arguments exceedingly important. And it makes objections during closing arguments, like, I'm going to put it like 92%, because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be arguing in one direction or the other, and they're going to be exceeding the scope of what was actually testified to because there was so much information they have to try and condense into a closing argument. So, excuse me. We go to a brief recess during a period of time here. Mr. Harpootlian's cross-examination is not as long as I would have imagined, but what I wanted to get to was the Paul concept that he raised, or the Paul concerns that he had. Now, for those of you who have experience in handling firearms, this is going to make you want to scream and jump out of your skin. It's going to. I'm sorry about that. It drove me nuts today, but he actually pulls out the actual shotgun, but it has a very, very interesting effect. It actually gives you a visual of the actual length of the barrel. So when we're talking about, even if I'm holding up a yardstick, it's hard to visualize what 2 feet actually is from the end of the muzzle to a body part. If I'm actually holding up a shotgun, it becomes so much more real to the jury. They're instantly concerned and they're focused on the firearm itself. Now, the shotgun was cleared. It was locked. It was safe for court. It is a very visceral thing to see, but I think it also leads to very effective testimony.
Bud? Yes, sir.
Okay, when you looked at the tire pictures, was there any mud on them?
There are.
Pointed out that
Come on.
Which one? On that chest.
On the chest?
Oh, that's where he points to the door. Mr. Barber comes and takes the, that's the one I want to get to, the Mr. Barber. And that's in redirect, I think. So my favorite attorney of the trial so far is poor Mr. Barber, who ends up being the person that examines all of the experts. It's my favorite attorney because I love his tone, his cadence. He doesn't do too much leading or any of that other junk that you've been seeing Creighton Waters or
Easel was a mirror.
Mr. Barber has been great in cross. I think he's been one of the most effective attorneys, period. And then the other attorney that I would say on the prosecution side is one of the younger gentlemen that's sitting at the front of the table up there. Those have been the most effective, I think, as far as the attorneys are concerned. But Mr. Barber has become the courtroom mannequin for the defense. It's different than Dick Harpootlian getting down on the floor and doing these things. But let's talk about this because he resets the scene and he uses the doorway, and I think it's important for us to visualize.
Mirror image or a negative of what actually occurred, right?
It was the opposite side.
No. Here we go.
Well, Mr. Barber, in the interest of justice, has allowed me to point the shotgun at him, Your Honor. It is. So we agree that if he's standing in the doorway, the shooter would have had the shot and how about turn a little bit to your turn that way? A little bit more.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the shotgun.
Great strategy as far as using another person, but allowing the witness the deference to position the body exactly how the witness believes it was. Because at this point in time, you can't really question the state's narrative because the state's narrative, the witness is there directing how the body is positioned. Not a lawyer arguing, the witness is being able to direct how the body is positioned. I thought this was pretty effective, especially with the door jamb in place, and especially the fact that this is a left swing door. This is the exact door position. And I don't think this went unnoticed by the defense team when they saw all of this happening, that the door that exited from the witness box and from the jury room was a left swing out door. This is the exact door layout that was existing in the feed room. So now the jury has a full visual of both the swing of the door and a human body in front of it. And as you can see, this is I think it's a 7-foot door. 7-foot door. Mr. Barber's substantially taller than what Paul would have been. And now he's going to go and try to reenact essentially what this final shot would be.
Would have been about like this. About like this.
Yes.
Okay.
Even better move by Dick Harpootlian. There's no way that was unintentional. He intentionally shallows out the angle of the weapon so that the witness has to correct him to make it even more extreme and more downward. Now, this is a little deceptive, and I'll get to explain why.
Okay. So that's the trajectory. That's where the barrel of the shotgun would have had to be.
In my opinion, yes.
And Alex.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
You may step down. Yes, sir.
Very effective way of handling that witness. Now, that witness did a lot of things to assist the state. He did a great job of laying out the visual for this crime scene. And I thought he did people liked him, didn't like him. I wish they had used a little bit more in the way of explanation, but I think that his analysis didn't completely catch me off guard as being, well, that doesn't make any sense. It made sense for a lot of what he was saying. Now, having walked around my house with a prop, I'm going to give you a couple of different theories. I don't usually like to speculate or do anything like this, but enough people have been so mad that they think that I'm not seeing how it would be possible, or wouldn't it be possible, or Rob, you're just ignoring these things. I'm saying that I can see a possibility for Alex being the shooter. I'm saying I can see a possibility. And if I'm the state, I'm going to argue this. Here is the exact argument I give if I'm the state. And then I'll do the defense. So don't get your hopes up or down. Either way, we're going to do this kind of neutrally. The state's argument is that Alex Murdaugh is down there at the kennels, that Paul is in one of the kennels tending to one of the dogs, and a chicken gets out, and he is wrestling with Maggie to try and secure the chicken. He ends up asking Paul to assist him in getting the dog back in the kennels. Paul helps him get the dog back in the kennels, and he tells Paul, can you go throw this in the feed room? Paul goes and puts this in the feed room. Alex follows. There's a shotgun that was laying around there because they were either shooting it or it was there before. Alex picks up the shotgun and gets the first shot as Paul is in the feed room. And then what he does is he immediately starts shouting, my gosh, it was an accident. I didn't mean to pull the trigger. Oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Because it's birdshot. No, that first one was buckshot. That one tore straight through. Buckshot. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Paul takes a bunch of lumbering steps because his father is outside the door or inside the door, helping him ostensibly get stuff in the feed room. And as he's taking these lumbering steps, his father, Alex Murdaugh, the defendant, feigns putting down the shotgun outside of the door jamb. He feigns putting it down and leaning against the door jamb. And as he does that, he has the shotgun basically braced against the floor and pulls the trigger aimed towards Paul. That's the fatal shot. Maggie has heard the first shot, and when Alex is screaming and saying, are you okay? This was accidental discharge. Maggie starts streaming around the side. And then, having seen what Alex has just done, Alex reaches into the feed room where he had the other firearm secured, turns around and spins rather quickly in an upward trajectory, firing a shot because he's got the gun on the ground. Fires the shot, it goes upward, it hits the ceiling. Second shot goes upward. Maggie at this point in time has turned around to run. Maggie goes and runs. 1 shot, 2 shot, 3 shot. Maggie turns around, falls. Then he circles around, and that's where he does the rest of it. That's the prosecution's best argument. From what I can tell, prosecution's best argument. Now, there's still holes here. Here's why there are still a lot of holes here. Because that was one way of doing it. But tell me the proof the prosecution has given you that that's actually how it took place. That is one alternative, but is not something that I can say has been proven at all beyond a reasonable doubt. Can I visualize something like that happening in my head? Yes. Can I see it? Did I kind of imagine how it would partake? And did I walk around my house trying to make it happen? Yeah. Could happen that way, but it's a lot of speculation. It takes me a lot to get there. And then there's the other question. The proximity that Alex would have to be in order to get that shot off. The shot, essentially the first shot in the feed room, isn't going to do a whole lot as far as spray is concerned. That second shot, though, if Alex is kneeling down to try and feign putting the weapon down, or even if the weapon is down at that trajectory, at that angle, the spatter that's going to exist from that is going to be everywhere. Now, people have made comments that he could have taken his shirt off or showered or been hosed off. Let me tell you this. Going back to the image of the feed room and the trajectory, that spatter at that angle would have essentially been on his back, on his hair, every single place in his body based on that particular angle with a birdshot. And the state's own witness kind of testified in a way that allows you to reach that conclusion. And that's without him picking up the 300 blackout. Okay, so that's one scenario. Second scenario, there's a second person involved. One person is either hiding behind the ATV or in the shed. And Alex secures the dogs, gets the dog put away, and then goes back up and says, hollers over his shoulder, I'm going to go take a nap. They say, okay. Maggie says, Paul, why don't you go and clean things up? Put that away. Go ahead and throw that in the feed room. Paul's in the feed room. Second shooter sees an opportunity, sweeps out from under this area and shoots as Paul's in there. This splits off into 2 different scenarios. There's a third person. No, there's not. Hang on. Laura, good one. No proof of a second person. Not a lick of it. No proof of a lot of things, Laura. There really isn't. And then I have a spin-off on this one too. Second shooter comes from around the corner, shoots Paul, and there's 2 alternatives it can split from. A third shooter has already positioned himself to take the shot at Maggie when Maggie's coming around the corner after hearing the first shot, because that first shot is going to send Maggie in that direction, arguably. And then the second shooter finishes Maggie off having the second gun in his hand. Scenario that involves Alex and a second shooter. Alex does the first shot, Maggie does the second shot. Situation of the second shooter acting alone. Second shooter partakes in the first shot, does the exact same thing that I laid out for you guys as far as Alex is concerned. That's there. Based on what I am seeing in this evidence, and by the way, the whole footprints thing doesn't really do a whole lot because there wasn't really good preservation of any of that evidence. You have Jack S. at that scene, other than a heck of a lot of shells, a lot of cartridges, and a lot of guns, 2 of which they are saying they can't locate. Now, the other reason Poot used the Benelli because the barrel length on the Benelli that's in evidence is the same barrel length of the Benelli that went missing, so that he could demonstrate the angle and the awkward angle would be at. Now, it's up to you guys to decide, but I'm fairly inclined to think that a lot of the scenarios that I have given you, in my mind, they are reasonable alternatives given the evidence that we have. So there's no evidence or proof that there's anyone else down there. There's no proof that there was or was not. The only cell activity, why does there have to be cell activity? Why? I really want you guys to just, here's the thing. I did something that I have not done before. I gave you a pure speculation on 3 or 4 different scenarios. I gave pure theory, 100% pure theory. I can see at least one of those being somewhat reasonable. And then that gets me all the way to the shots taken at Maggie. And that's before I talk about cleanup. Because the cleanup fit that in the time frame and the absence of blood on everything. And where did the blood go? And where did the firearms go? And that then turns back to yesterday's live stream with multiple people where it's kind of talking about the state's investigation. And as we saw during cross-examination by Jim Griffin, 9 million holes in that examination. It just, this is one where morally right is going to feel different for people than legally provable. It is a hard truth that we all have to face. Morally right, and whether someone can be morally judged might be different than what the state has proven beyond any reasonable doubt. Now that I've given my whole synopsis of the crime scene, I'd love to get the opinions of a friend of mine. How you doing, Kurt?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm quite well. Did you watch any of today's trial?
I did watch some of it, yes, intermittently. I had it on in the background, and I was on the stream for a little bit of it, but mostly not. I did enjoy courtroom yoga. I did enjoy Child's Pose. I think really the Warrior 2 is really more where it's at, but
That's a good
maybe
one.
next time. Yeah.
So how
And
much of my little replay?
Personally,
did you catch?
I like Up Dog because I like the way that it feels on my back. But
What's
that's
Up
just
Dog?
me.
What's up,
Yeah.
dog?
Exactly.
I see
Yes.
where I saw where you were going.
Yes. Well, I try to help.
So
I'll get you next time, Rob.
That was a good one though. Did you hear
Okay.
any of my recap here?
I did.
What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are my thoughts are many. I think with respect to the whole roadside shooting thing, one of the things that we demonstrated to me is that Murdaugh may not necessarily be the best planner and or executor of those plans, and is not some sort of master criminal who really has it all together. It seemed like he's not someone who's just meticulous beyond all hope or meticulous beyond all measure and really just has everything down to an absolute T. It's many, many problems that, could have been spotted with a little bit more with care. So I take that example and also just take other things that were going on in his life to say that while I think your scenario of the shooting is a plausible scenario, I'm still having problems with, he has a 16-minute time frame tops, assuming that he does the murders the moment the phones are locked for the last time, right? He does them at 8:50. He leaves the house at 9:06. He has 16 minutes tops, right? So if he fires the bullets immediately, he has to do all the things you just said, plus he has to clean up, he has to get rid of the guns, he has to transport them in his car somehow without getting blood anywhere in his car, not in the trunk, not on the seats, nowhere, that he doesn't really have time to clean off the guns because he's doing everything in a rush. He has to clean off himself so there's no trace of blood on him. He has to get rid of the clothes. He has to clean up somehow without tracking blood all over the place. Go to Alameda, ditch the guns while visiting his mom.
Without
he doesn't have a
trace
lot of
blood on
time
him.
there. He doesn't have a lot of time.
Without the appearance of being soaking wet. Because you will
without the
notice
appearance
that
of being soaking wet.
Ms. Shelley
And
made
so-
no reference to him tracking wet or being wet when
Yeah.
he walked in the house.
Thanks to the beautiful Lawn Star data, we now know that he didn't stop anywhere along the path, there or back. So unless you believe he's throwing out shotguns and rifles out the window like a used fast food wrapper,
Here's the thing. Everyone, I'm going to pull up a bunch of these comments. Every one of these comments is valid. All of you guys are making valid comments. These are valid observations that get me to a lot of questions. The problem is, the questions is favorable to the defense from a legal standpoint, not
Yep.
from a moral standpoint, not from an ethical standpoint. All of these questions, you are 100% right. They are questions that exist, just like what I outlined as far as the different hypotheticals. They're questions. How do we know he left from the house? Because he arrived, because the vehicle didn't stop. The vehicle started at 9:06. The vehicle did not stop until it reached Alameda, and you have Ms. Shelley testifying to him showing up at Alameda. That's how
Yep.
you know that he left the house at that time.
GPS data is the answer to that question. Oh, by the way, for what it's worth, when they were talking about the cell phone data, if I heard correctly, and maybe my memory is slightly fuzzy, but I think they said there were only 2 other cell phone signals detected that night, both of which were from first responders. So there were 2 other at Moselle. At Moselle, there were, other than the Murdaughs, there were 2 other cell signals detected that night, both of which were from first responders. I'm going to take a guess that there were substantially more than 2 first responders who showed up that night with cell phones on them. But
this is
only 2 cell phones registered on the towers, which is totally plausible because we've heard about how spotty the cell phone connection is out there. So I'm going to just take a stab in the dark that more than 2 first responders had a cell phone on them that didn't show up on the tower logs.
Yeah. And so Calm Kitty, I see this comment. The thing is, where did he hide the guns on property? Because law enforcement had access to the property that entire night. They had that place locked down. And how far is he getting on property in the 16 minutes without tire treads and without anyone else tracing where he might have gone? I understand this. And it's a good point. This one I thought was interesting because I hadn't thought about this. When Maggie's blowing the steering wheel, people made the comment that he made the call 911 from it connected to Bluetooth. If he had gone and touched Maggie's body and did the pulse thing, like he said, then wiped that off or tried to wipe that off and went back in and started the call from the inside of the car, I don't know. You guys are going to come up with 9 million scenarios. I don't think that I'll ever convince anyone beyond a reasonable doubt of one direction or the other, but it's that freaking standard. It's that standard.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
And this is also perhaps the stark reality that the lawyers in the room have to face, is that the jurors don't necessarily think this way, despite all the instructions that we want to give them in the world about this is what they're supposed to do. I think I think it's very likely that what's going to happen in reality is the jurors are going to go back into that room and they're going to ask themselves the question, is it probable that Alex Murdaugh had some sort of connection to these murders? And that's the question that they're really going to answer in the real world. And what that says about our system or anything else is a whole other existential crisis.
This is a complicated thing where there's this much of this stuff going on. And I want to get to, we're going to replay did you watch any of the argument from this morning? The first argument on the motions?
A little bit, yes.
All right. So I want to replay that motion, that argument kind of from start to finish, because there's some nuggets in there that I think we're going to talk about, but I do want to play it from start to finish. And let me see here. Let me do this. Let me do it via video file and see if I can't do it this way.
And like, I don't really have a good theory about what happened in general. I don't really have a good explanation. I don't have a good alternative hypothesis. Any hypothesis I would make would be purely speculative. The people that were out after, Murdaugh knew about him going to his father's house, or at least projected, and they were somehow looking to wait for him to leave. And then they went onto the properties to commit the murders. Right, because they figure, well, he's going to go visit his mom, and so somehow they knew about that because it's a small town. It's not like unheard of that somehow that news could spread to the nefarious ne'er-do-wells, and so they were waiting, by the roadside for him to leave, and then went to the property, committed the murders. But I don't really have any evidence of that proposition. I don't really have tire treads or cell phone data or anything that would lead me to that conclusion. It's pure speculation in the dark. So, but I on some level, at least on a legal level, I don't need to provide an alternative explanation, which again gets me back to yesterday in my fury with the state's questions of, well, Alex Murdaugh didn't provide you with alternative suspects, and I was ready to curt rage.
It's burden shifting. It's
burden shifting.
And it's what the state's been, and this is the point that Sky Ricky makes here that I think is a very, very, very valid point. The jury isn't made up of lawyers or criminal profilers. They can
that
use
was my
common
sense.
sense. They can use their thoughts and impressions. And then this one, I think, is Liza's big downfall: stealing money. You guys are 100% right, but that's not where I'm not going to analyze a jury. I'm not doing that. What I'm doing and what I'm trying to add is to your understanding of the trial and the evidence as it comes in and how that weighs legally, because this is something where you never ever hope. Just kind of go on a massive stretch here, massive stretch, and say that someone in your family or you at some point in time, you end up at the absolute worst part of your life, in the worst place in your existence. You've made millions of mistakes, and you have done so many terrible things that you're trying to make recompense for. I'm not equating this to Murdaugh, so do not make that equation. You are in this position, and the one time that you don't do the thing you're being accused of doing, the one time, hypothetically speaking, whether it's this act or whether it's something simple as how many of you guys had siblings growing up, where there was one sibling who was always the victim in the fights, and the other, and who ran to mom or dad, and the other one that was kind of the aggressor. And the one time that you didn't hit the sibling, or the sibling didn't get hit, they run to the mom and dad turns around and says, "I know you did it because," and it was that one time that you didn't actually do the thing. And I'm not talking about Murdaugh. What I'm talking about is the rest of human society. Everybody else. You cannot make rules based on the exception, based on the one case that is so egregiously horrible, and the person that is so just, I mean, he's a moral dumpster fire. I don't think I can explain it better.
Well, the stealing from the widows and orphans and all the rest of it didn't help, but convict him for that. I have no problem with going to jail for the financial crimes. Convict him of that.
Everything.
The evidence seems pretty good. Do that. That'd be fine.
But if the state is trying to deprive him of his life and liberty and hang him on a conviction of, and I don't mean hang him like literally, there's no death penalty on the table here, but if the state's trying to do these things, they have a burden that is ensured to every person in this system that they prove every element of this crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And that means beyond speculation. That means beyond conjecture. That means beyond this would make sense to me. That means not only this makes sense to me, but nothing else makes sense to me. Nothing else makes sense to me.
Yeah, I feel like there's just too much conjecture. So whatever it says about me or psychology, at least, I'm a no vote. So
I think from a reasonable person, from a juror that's not a trained lawyer today, with regard to the roadside incident, I think they're either A, confused, or B, they've made their mind up in one direction.
Yeah.
So let's listen to the motion argument real quick.
Then cross-examined the witness regarding, did you consider Eddie Smith to be in the circle? Did you know that Alex was spending $50,000 per week supporting a drug habit, presumably through Eddie Smith? The court conducted a pretrial, a hearing outside the presence of the jury, addressed the issue, made it clear that the roadside shooting was a bridge too far. Then the defense decided to build a road over that bridge, decided to just go right there as if they could dance through fire without getting burned, scarred, or anything.
It was kind of the judge's point. The defense brought it up. The defense made it the issue. So now the prosecution gets to play all of that thing. Now this is a pitfall.
Yep.
We are now within our third
I
trial.
think the consensus is that the defense did it deliberately. They knew exactly what they were doing.
I feel like they did.
The prosecutor.
and I feel like Jim Griffin. Let me see, because I think I can pull up the actual. I want to pull up some of this law and crime. I hate that I'm typing that into a browser, but hey, you know what? You do what you do.
They had 100,000 people watching today on stream.
Did they?
Mm-hmm.
Good for
Yeah,
them.
they had 100,000 people watching live.
Good for them. So, but a lot of this was, so Jim Griffin gives the argument. The argument is like kind of half, I don't mean to say half-assed. He pulls out and he tries to make this last-ditch argument like it doesn't come in. Now, here's why he makes the argument, because for a second, if it was just Cousin Eddie, then I'm sitting here thinking this is going off the rails, and off the rails is good for the defense. But what the prosecutor does, Creighton Waters, he goes, fine, you want to play this game? We can play this game. And he's going, we're going through all of it. All of it. We're going to play the tape of you in the hospital. We're going to play the tape of, we're going to play the statement by the EMT. We're going to play the tape of you sitting there with Jim Griffin and Dick Harpootlian speaking to the investigator. We are going to go down this road 100%. I don't think the defense liked all of that, but I also don't think it favors the prosecution's case.
Yeah.
So it's
someone made a very calculated decision, I think.
Someone did, and
these are reasonably smart lawyers.
And someone reacted to it. I think that the one thing you're seeing here is these attorneys. This is what I wanted to play towards the end of the motions argument this morning. It gets ridiculous, like literally ridiculous.
Well,
because it's
definitely one thing that can be said about this case. A lot of different levels.
100% fair. That right there, Kurt, is probably the most fair thing that you could imagine. So it starts when Dick Harpootlian gets up, and then they start doing this. So the judge makes his ruling, right? And it kind of like judge makes their ruling. You don't need to highlight the ruling. The ruling is the ruling. You don't go beyond that. You just you accept it, and you don't even tell the judge you accept it. You just do. This is how this plays out afterwards. So I want to take a look at this. So you can see on the screen, 7 minutes in, the judge has made his ruling. The rest of the time that we're going to watch, and we're going to watch on 1.25 speed. I'm sorry. Well, now I'm going to keep it normal because Creighton Waters is too fast on 1.25. The rest of the time that we're watching, these are the attorneys who I am convinced hate each other. Oh, they hate each other. And any manner of politeness aside, they are not fans of one another at all. So let's see.
To be a conspiracy, along with the person that the defense seeks to insinuate to be or should have been a suspect, the state is entitled to explore that. The extent to which the state should be.
Right, come on, we're going to go.
That's they tend to do that. But the record is protected to the extent that Mr. Griffin went through YouTube and citing what his version of what he said yesterday, excluding the portion that's more relevant and important to the court's ruling.
Side note, Jim Griffin or Creighton Waters, if you're watching any of these recaps and you want some kind of thoughts, I'm happy to give them to either side. Just know I'm going to operate within the confines of the law, and I'm not really persuaded one way or the other.
Yeah.
But the record speaks for itself on all of that, and the court's ruling stands as it was given on yesterday.
Your Honor, obviously we would accept your ruling, but there's.
Okay, now we have a ruling, we have for the record, now we have an exception to the ruling, and another comment. Go ahead.
What
He's
I'd like
so
to discuss
done.
now is what the state will be allowed to submit in support of this position. Now, clearly there is a taped statement by Mr. Murdaugh from a detox facility in Atlanta, which was initiated by Mr. Griffin and I. So certainly there's no objection to that.
This is good stuff.
Could be, but no real objection to that. Secondly,
No objection to the statement.
well, no objection to the statement pursuant to
Other
and
than
conditioned
those
by
you-
our previous objection.
Yes.
Other
to-
than the objection.
I want to make
being,
the record clear.
The one
Yeah.
I gave
We're
before.
objecting to any of this.
No, I understand. You've objected to everything throughout the trial.
I didn't like that remark. I didn't like that remark. That didn't need to be made. That's the defense's job.
It's not even true.
It's not
It's
even
not
true. There haven't been a lot of objections. There's been tons of leading. We've made our point about it. I didn't like that remark from the judge. I understand the judge is frustrated, and he has a good point of being frustrated. When Dick Harpootlian gets up and says, "I just want to make one more comment," the judge has every right to say, "No, no, 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 no. I just ruled on the record. We're getting trial going." So,
How does no
Well-
work for you, Dick?
oh, I mean, I think this judge has been consistent. While I have disagreed with a lot of his rulings, at the very least, he has been consistent, which means predictable from a trial attorney standpoint.
Yeah, that's fair.
I understand.
Well, there's a couple of things we missed. We'd like to rehear some of those, but
Oh, God.
Your Honor, but then, and again, Mr. Waters and I discussed last night after your ruling, a way perhaps, I know this is shocking, to expedite this process. For instance, there is a statement made to EMS, the statement they're wanting to get to, which is, drive-by shooting, all those sorts of things, which he later on admitted in the telephone conversation statement that was taken, was not true. We get that. It didn't need to be Mirandized on the side of the road by EMS.
Stop.
However, there are two recorded statements taken at the Savannah Hospital by Agent Kelly after he is, and we've got the medical records here if you want to look at them, but clearly has suffered a wound to his head, a fractured skull.
Always suspect of that word clearly.
Nothing has
And
been clear in
clear.
this fucking trial.
Everything is in controversy.
I don't think this is in controversy. I
Tell me what's clear again.
bullet wound to the head, fractured skull, brain bleed.
Okay.
That's not contested.
We're still fast forwarding because
Got you here.
we have minutes to go through.
So we don't believe those should come in without Your Honor being able to rule that he was competent, hear from the doctors. And I think we may have worked out a compromise on that. I just want to confirm that for the record. But what we have worked out is
He's
this.
not amused. He's frustrated.
The
not
statement that he would not have to bring the EMS people. There's a statement that they made. Agent Kelly can publish that statement without having them need to be here. There was a knife recovered at the scene. They don't have to Kelly can identify that. There was a, what else?
Your Honor, so what we talked about yesterday, just to kind of wrap.
Back and forth. Good comment here. The judge has no one else to blame for how the trial happened. He allowed them to bring in all this stuff. That's half judge, half lawyers. Lawyers choose what arguments they're going to make, and they choose how they want to make them. And then what the judge made a comment about, I thought earlier was kind of interesting, was I don't decide things that you guys agree on. I decide things that you can't agree on. That's the judge's role. It's basically when the parties cannot agree on a position, they put it to the judge, and the judge, knowing the limited information he has, he doesn't have the backstory on a lot of this stuff.
That being said, I always do enjoy it when parties agree and the judge is like, nah, anyway.
Yeah.
I do like when that happens.
He's like, no, not doing
Occasionally,
it.
it does occasionally happen. The parties are like, we both agree. The judge is like, no.
It does. I think I'm not going to come down here. Here's the thing. I'm not going to come down hard on any judge. I am still a practicing lawyer in front of all judges. I kind of have a very difficult position here. I can't really come and critique judges too unfairly or too harshly because I still practice in front of judges. And to the extent that any judge I appear in front of ever sees me bad-mouthing a judge, that can harm my clients. So that might sway some of the comments that you might hear me make about judges. I try to make
You just have to convince the judges that you're talking to that they're one of the good ones.
They're one of
talking
the
about the
good,
inferior judges,
exactly.
unlike you, Your Honor.
So then I'll sound like Dick Harpootlian trying to sell snake oil in court.
Yeah,
Like,
a little bit.
yeah, no, I am in a bind because I can talk about the rulings and talk about how they might have legally gotten it right or wrong in the moment, but I can't come in and angle at a judge based on a perception of bias or a side they make as saying they're throwing the trial. I can't do that. I'm not allowed to, because I appear in front of them. I can actually be reprimanded. There's a professional rules of conduct. I can't make comments about that kind of stuff. Actually, I cannot. Yeah, Kurt, you stand up in front of these judges and see what they do to you. Contempt. And then you see it's not that, it's what they do to your client.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put my clients at risk because of that crap.
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time because I love
Or to
it.
look at this and say, well, you agreed to it. We're agreeing to this process pursuant to Your Honor's ruling this morning.
I have not reviewed any of the evidence that you all are now referencing. So to the extent that you all have an agreement on moving forward with this evidence, considering the objections, I'm fine with taking 5-10 minutes if that will expedite things. I deal with what you all disagree on, not what you agree on.
Yeah, that's Judge's point. How does Barnes deal with it? I don't know. I'm not Barnes. That's the point there. I'm not Barnes. I have the Virginia Board of Ethics to respond to. And I'm sorry, my license my license to practice law is probably the most important thing in my world. I love the practice of law. And I love doing that. So I'm not gonna jeopardize that to go out on a limb and say something that I'm not really comfortable saying, especially when I have to appear in front of the judge in the future. Especially when it puts my license at yeah. So we then have who people started saying, why is Rob in South Carolina? Because the witness that takes the stand to introduce the audio tape.
Kelly, we fixed our technical difficulties, and for the record, about to publish the 911 call.
And y'all, that gentleman on the stand, that is not me. That is not my brother. That is not my cousin. He is substantially more handsome, and he has a fancy pin. So thank you for the graces, but let's here we go. 911 call. This is what everyone wanted to hear. Not 911, the interview call. 911 call is well, 911. We'll play a little bit of this.
Secretary 911 was emergency. On Salkehatchie Road. Okay, what's the address on Salkehatchie Road? I'm by the church. What church? What church are you talking about? I don't know the name of it with the red roof. What in the Salkehatchie Road? I don't know what you're talking about.
That's that's court audio, people.
In my earphones, it feels very.
What's going on?
Wow.
I got a flat tire.
Was Court TV better than that?
I don't know. I don't remember that it was. It's just, yeah.
That's horrible.
My very nice earphones are picking up quite a lot of that.
A lot of that gain, man. Oh my gosh. Let me see. Was Court TV better than that audio? I'm going to do a quick preview because I don't blow your eardrums off again. So Kurt, what did you do today other than this crazy case?
Mostly this. I played a little bit of the Hogwarts Legacy game. That was fun.
How is that game playing out?
It's a good game for what it's trying to be. But the sound is really good. Music is really good. Voice acting is nice. The attention to detail is very nice. I've never played a Harry Potter game before, so I don't have anything to compare it to. But I felt very much like I'm in Hogwarts, the castle, and the surrounding environment. I think they did a very good job in sort of translating the movie and various locations into the aesthetic of the game. The game is somewhat simple to play. It's not complicated, so it's a little point and shooty. It's a little point and clicky, but not quite that bad, like a Telltale game. but it's a little simplistic. The combat could be described as intuitive and somewhat simple. But I've been enjoying it. It's a very well polished, well put together game. Enjoyable environment. I've been enjoying it. It's fun. If you're a fan of Harry Potter, I think it's doing a very good job of being what it wants to be.
Okay. I will take that because I love Harry Potter. Who doesn't love Harry Potter? Okay, let's see. I think Court TV has less offensive audio, so we're gonna try it. Fingers crossed, folks. So that's in the EMT.
Hampton County 911, where's your emergency? On Salkehatchie
Oh, that
Road.
is so much nicer.
Okay. What's on Salkehatchie Road?
I'm by the church.
What church? What church are you talking about?
I don't know the name of it with the red roof.
Okay. What end of Salkehatchie Road? Because I don't know what you're talking about.
At the Hampton County side.
Okay. What's going on?
I got a flat tire.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped, and somebody stopped to help me. And when I turned my back, they tried to shoot me.
Oh, okay. Were you shot?
Yeah, but I'm okay.
You shot where?
Operator,
Where were
like-
you shot at?
Oh, okay.
Maybe the order of those is a little bit the order of operations. I have a flat tire. Also, I was shot.
Wait, you need EMS?
Well, I mean, yes, I can't drive.
Okay.
You need
And
EMS.
I'm bleeding a lot.
Lol.
What
No, I
part of your
don't.
body?
I'm not sure. Somewhere on my head.
Your head?
Somebody just stopped me, ma'am. For 911.
Okay. Still?
Hey,
Okay, let me speak to him, see if he can tell me exactly where you are.
For the record, I'm stopping that at 141. Was that the defendant on the 911 call?
Yes,
At that point in time, he said, someone shot me.
yes.
Did he identify who that was?
No, he did not.
Fast forward to the EMS.
PO Box 457?
457 Hampton.
310,000 feet, Temple, 310,000 feet, Temple. Uniform Nancy Popper, 136, repeat, Uniform Nancy Popper.
So what is, you say it's a blue color pickup, it's a Ford, a GMC, or what?
It wasn't a Ford, I know that.
Was it a Ford, like a Ram type, or
You know, I think it was a GMC or a Chevrolet, but
GMC?
I'm not totally positive.
Like I promised, or not? So you got a flat tire in Mercedes Benz, one side of the road, try to change the tire. The blue color pickup came inside you, thought everything was okay, and then the cloud, you think of a shotgun in the shop. How many times it fired? You think?
I think just one time.
What time?
I lost my vision right when it first happened.
Okay.
And I think I wait for we talked to the
I'm gonna take him to the hospital. I'm gonna find out.
We're fine. Yeah, we're fine. Yeah, we can handle that.
Okay,
Not no traumas are hit like that.
when the flight
We'll find out.
we'll find out where I'm going. What's gonna give me a picture?
All right, for the record, I played that clip from about 14:07 to 14:10 by the timestamp. Was that the defendant in the ambulance at the scene on Salkehatchie Road?
Yes, it was.
And did he again tell the story that he had been shot by an unknown assailant?
Yes, the story was consistent.
All right, and did he say at any time during that anyone shot him?
No,
And what did he say the weapon sounded like that shot him?
he said it sounded like a shotgun.
So they go to the hospital.
If you were shot in the head with a shotgun, I think you'd notice.
You wouldn't be. So oh no. So they go to the hospital. This is
Maybe
the
that's
sketch.
why he thought shooting his son in the head with a shotgun wouldn't be that big a deal.
I don't, God, Kurt. Either way, like, here's the thing. This is the part. It's a little dark.
Okay.
I don't know. It's a little dark. I wouldn't really call it dark after how much of this freaking trial we have heard. Either way. So this right here, and before I say this, let me say, just briefly, I'm going to pull this down. Guys, there are 5,000 of you here watching.
Ooh.
Undoubtedly, some of you guys are newer people, and I thank you for being here very much. First, I'd like to point out my very dear friend, Kurt. If you do not follow him,
we got some great cases coming up on my channel next week. The Supreme Court, thank God, is coming back to oral argument, and on Tuesday is a major Supreme Court oral argument we're going to be covering on my channel. It deals with the future of the internet. 2:30. It deals with.
This is the 2:30 case.
It is on Tuesday. Yes, Google was sued on the idea that their algorithm has promoted certain videos, and these videos are harmful, and they are effectively aiding and abetting in international terrorism, because the nature of the videos would be, well, that's the nature of the complaint.
This is the ISIS.
That'll be those people. Yes, that would be those people. That
the ISIS case.
That Google YouTube promoted videos that were radicalizing in a way that might be in violation of law. And so Google has used 2:30 as a defense, saying it's not our videos, which that's fine as far as C1 and C2 go. But there's a different provision that deals, well, basically it's whether or not the content is of another. Is it another's content is basically the bottom line issue. So the videos are another's content, but the algorithm, first of all, is that content. Yeah, is that content? It's certainly not another's. It's because it's theirs. So is it content? Is that in and of itself content? And so that case is being decided on Tuesday. So uncivil law for your U.S. Supreme Court needs is going to be a fantastic oral argument. I really look forward to having you join me.
I'm putting $5 on the over on an estimate of 3 hours total.
Oh God, you're probably right.
I think it's a fair bet. That'd be a good one though. I'll listen to that one, definitely.
Does anyone remember when Supreme Court oral arguments were an hour long? Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Me here. I loved them. They were great. But I also like the longer format because it's actually pretty cool. You get 2 more questions.
Well, if you like that, we could go way old school when Supreme Court oral arguments were days.
I don't want to do that again. I don't want to do that. But yeah, check out Kurt. 2:30. That's a huge case. I cannot overestimate the significance of that case. And the oral argument is going to be very interesting. And the thing with oral argument, Supreme Court, it takes someone who knows Supreme Court oral arguments, like my friend Kurt. I'm pretty good. Kurt's a lot better than I am at explaining what you're hearing and whether one side is winning or not. I will tell you this right now, do not trust any of the stupid pundits you see out there on masthead media.
No.
They always get it wrong in their predictions or how the court is siding one way or the other. So please check out Kurt. And for those of you that are here watching who have not joined my channel or been subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. I'm trying to do these recaps to try to make Friday night's show not a 6-hour live stream. And to also give a recap, because a lot of this stuff is happening on a daily basis. I made a comment earlier that any one of my friends that's trying to watch this trial that has not been watching on a daily basis, you're screwed. You're not going to catch up. Too much has happened. It is impossible. This has become the trialception. It is a trial within a trial within a trial within a trial.
That was one of the things about 403, which is this wonderful rule to exclude. It's like other evidence otherwise admissible we can keep out for, among other reasons, because it will confuse the jury. It goes to other issues. It's too tangential, too prejudicial, right? These are some of the reasons. And many of these reasons are being triggered along the way. This judge doesn't really seem to believe in 403.
Well, no, so you remember when I made the comments about consistency?
Yeah.
So I think the defense had a theory they were going to keep the finance out. But the second they saw the way the rulings were going, they realized they weren't. So what did they do? They changed their strategy to bait the prosecution to basically say that they knew how this judge would rule. And they knew that if they baited the prosecution into it and feigned enough opposition, the prosecution would jump through the wall like the Kool-Aid man, just screaming, "Oh yeah," and just run down the ramp, going completely.
You gotta think that they're having conversations amongst themselves, though. Like, aren't we being baited? That's gotta be a thought they're having.
It has to be.
Because they're not that dumb.
This is the O.J. Simpson. So, Cousin Eddie, this gentleman, Cousin Eddie, this gentleman who does not look anything like this gentleman. Cousin Eddie,
Kaylin of our story.
This is Cousin Eddie is the black leather glove of the O.J. Simpson case. It is the defense baiting the prosecution and saying, "I dare you to do this," having a plan in the backup. And the prosecution said, "You know what? I see that you are daring me to do this, but I'm going to double down on this, and it's going to go bad or good." We have made it to the high stakes tables in the casino, and we are gambling with all of the money, and we have all of our chips on the table. We are heavily leveraged. Both sides have thrown everything at this case. And at this point in time, everything is out there, and it's kind of a massive risk. And now you get to see how the lawyers are going to maneuver these facts.
Yep.
So this is the sketch that they do.
I'll give you one point for sure. The defense had contingency plans. So whether or not they wanted certain things or not, they had contingency plans. It's like, okay, we want this result, but if that doesn't happen, here's how we take that and work with it. It's like, how do we take disadvantage and turn it into an advantage? And that's the sign of a really good defense team. They thought through all the possibilities, and they had their flow chart ready to go. And so it's like, okay, that's fine. You want the financial stuff in? No problem. We got a plan for that too.
The prosecution didn't have that plan. They did not think that far ahead, and the defense has caught them flat-footed. So this is the sketch that gets rendered based on Murdaugh's statement at the hospital. Side note: this looks nothing like Cousin Eddie, zero like Cousin Eddie. So let's get to the actual taped interview. That's the last part of today's trial.
No, it should not. We're not. All right, telephone conference.
Were you able to make contact with the defense and have a subsequent interview with the defendant, Alex Murdaugh?
Yes, Mr. Arpulian called me on September 13th, 2021, and we were able to set up a telephone interview of Mr. Murdaugh.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 552, State's Exhibit 552, and see if you recognize this disc.
I do. This is a recording of the September 13th, 2021 interview with Mr. Murdaugh.
Your Honor, this time I would offer State's 552 into evidence, I believe, without additional objection.
No additional objections, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
I'm going to publish that to the jury.
And I think they're running tech issues, so I might have to fast forward in a minute.
Does anyone know if the prosecution is supposed to end this case at any time in the near future, by the way? They were supposed to end it Wednesday, and then today. Are they going to end tomorrow? Does anyone know?
No, there is no chance. And I have another theory on that. I think the defense is kind of speeding things up because they have experts that have time constraints.
Well, they already mentioned that. They have experts. I think the defense said they might call people for their case tomorrow.
You think what? Out of order? Yeah, they're going to call out of order.
Because I think they mentioned it on Friday, or mentioned on Wednesday. It's like we're going to have our people here on Friday ready to go. So I think the defense is going to call people out of order. They're going to actually start their case in the middle of the prosecution's case. Yeah. That's where we're at now. Good times.
Yeah. 9/13/21. Whose voice is that? Especially it's Jomar Albayalde.
Was he present with you when you conducted this interview?
Yes, he was.
Jim.
Hey, Jim, this is Ryan Kelly and Jomar Albayalde with SLED. How are you?
Hey, Ryan and Joe.
Yes.
We had an office over here in Atlanta with Alex and Dick, and I'm just gonna put the phone here on the table next to Alex and then turn it over to you guys. Well, let me start, Ryan. First of all, we only have about 30 to 40 minutes before we have to get out of here. Okay.
Okay, no problem, sir. Sorry about that. You caught me. I was halfway to Somerville, so I had to turn around and get into a place.
And I'm sorry, but we were late getting here to see Alex, and once we got in here, we got to have a long discussion.
Okay.
It's official. I'd like to walk him through some questions, which will then allow you to question him, but give you some sort of, rather than him just sort of wandering around.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, before we get started, can we just have, for the purpose of our notes, obviously we prefer not to do telephone interviews. This is how y'all requested, so obviously, we don't really have a choice. But we just I'm going to need Alex to identify himself, on the call, and basically what we do is I'm going to ask him his date of birth and the last four of his social.
Okay.
Listen to how excited the law enforcement officer is.
Alex, just go.
Hello.
Alex, should you give me your full name?
Okay, Richard Alexander Murdaugh.
Okay, and what's your date of birth?
My date of birth is May 27th, 1968,
Last four of your social.
7483.
Okay. And I
Last
understand,
four.
obviously this is a unique situation conducting this interview over the phone. We need to, obviously you've been receiving some treatment. So just for the overall, sake of your competency to be giving us information, are you right now, sound body and sound mind?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you talking to us willingly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, Dick.
Mistake.
Go.
This
go
trial
ahead,
didn't
sir.
teach you to shut the hell up with the police. I don't know what will.
It was the three prior times.
We've spent the last hour talking to him. We believe that he is a sound mind and body, and that he understands, and that he is in no way diminished capacity.
Okay.
He is perfectly competent to answer these questions. Now,
That's
we're willing to.
that.
We've advised that we're going to talk about the shooting incident a week ago Saturday, where he was shot in the head, how that happened, who and why it was done.
Okay.
We don't want to talk about what happened in Moselle.
Congrats,
we don't want
Krista.
to talk about anything involving finances at the law firm. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, Alex, let's talk about last Saturday morning, and let me go through this briefly. Who did you meet with and talk to last Saturday morning?
I met with Jim Griffin and T. Chessie.
Mm-hmm. And then what?
I drove to Canton and I met with Chris Wilson at my mom's house.
Okay. And you
I'm
and
going
Chris
to
were
bump this to
talking about what?
1.25 so we can go a little bit further before we get out of here.
Everything I'd done,
Okay, everything you had done concerning finances.
finances, bills, live.
Okay. Now,
Thank you, Josh.
okay, were you taking, well, first of all, let me back up for a second. Have you had a long-standing OxyContin for opioid addiction issue?
Yes, sir.
How many years?
The best I can remember, around 20 years, 18 to 20 years.
Okay. Now, on this particular day, on this Saturday, were you taking the OxyContin or taking any opioids?
I had taken some, but, I'd given it all that I had someone else, and I'd taken some at like 4 a.m., so I was having some withdrawals.
Okay. And the previous day, the news had come out about your embezzling or taking client money or law firm money. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how would you describe your state of mind at that time?
I was in a very bad place.
What does that mean?
I thought it would be better for me not to be here anymore.
What do you mean by not be here anymore?
I thought that it would make it easier on my family for me to be dead.
And easier, was some financial gain to your family if you were dead?
I have a fair amount of life insurance debt.
Do you remember how much?
Not off the top of my head, but like $10 million, $12 million.
Okay. And so you decided to end your life.
That's correct.
And tell these sweat agents how you went about arranging that.
Thank you, neurodivergent
I
counselor.
called Curtis Eddie
Very
Smith on the
generous.
telephone.
Okay, now let's stop for a second. Who was Curtis Eddie Smith?
Curtis Eddie Smith is the primary person who I purchased pills from for years.
And some weeks you would give him how much money for pills?
I mean, it'd be in my records, but we had weeks where there would be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000.
That math doesn't math at all.
Yeah, that's a lot of drugs.
And I'm with people. Yeah, here you go. Janelle, perfect. I seen the math on pill cost. That is wrong. Cost 10 milligram. Yes, I have seen these costs I've seen them on the street. I know what people are doing with them, not because I purchased them, because I have clients whose kids are buying them. And that ends up in a lot of custody battles. This math does not math. Like he would have a
900
pill
a
collection
day?
for like 3 months. Max consumption, otherwise like be dead.
So you could do 7,000. You could do 7,000 a week. That's interesting.
It is, the numbers are wild, but then again, what's he paying Cousin Eddie for? Is he paying Cousin Eddie for the pills, or is he paying him for other stuff too? Prosecutor makes a really good point at the end of the call. We're going to get there, and I'm going to do that. That's probably going to be the last part we're going to cover.
I think when you borrow money from the drug dealers, I think they charge you more than the statutory maximum for the usury.
The interest rate, generally speaking, I think is higher than credit card rates these days, which credit card rate, if you have to go off of today's interest rates, I mean, I don't know what drug dealers are charging these days, but credit
Probably
cards
more
are,
than 24% APR, I'm guessing.
Probably. I imagine it's pretty substantial. But yeah, so the numbers do not make sense. So is he hiding money? Is he paying money to Cousin Eddie for another purpose, for security, for drugs, for protection, or for acts that are not to be disclosed? I don't know. And that's kind of where we're left.
That you would give him for pills?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you've known him for how long?
Years.
Years. So did you call him that morning?
Yes, sir, I did.
That day? About what time?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I asked him to.
Was it after you met with Jim Griffin?
It was after I met with Jim
After
Griffin.
you met with Chris Wilson?
I believe so.
Okay, and when you called him, what did you ask him?
I asked him to meet me.
Did he meet you?
He did.
Where did he meet you?
He met me out not too far from my mom's house.
Where?
He was on the side of the road. I think at a funeral home.
At the funeral home. Okay, and did y'all talk?
Not there. He followed me into town.
To where?
To over where I stopped by the Sunoco gas station.
Okay, did y'all have a discussion there?
Yes, sir.
Did y'all get out of your cars or just?
Hello, everyone. I'm on civil law. How are you all doing? I've taken over Rob's channel, so I hope you like it very much. If you'd like to learn more from the misfortunes of others, no problem. That's what I do on my channel. How y'all doing? So Rob has once again yeeted himself, and yes, I have overtaken the channel. So great. What should we talk about, chat? How are y'all doing? I think that this trial has just been an absolute cluster through and through in every possible way. The thing that continues to defy my understanding about this trial is the lack of a cohesive story for the prosecution throughout. It's just bad trial advocacy. There's just so much detail. And especially if you know the jury can't take notes, you need the story, because you don't need to remember the details. You need to remember the story, right? If you go watch a movie, or if you, maybe a better example these days might be like a series of TV, like that's binge worthy. If you go watch like a lot of TV, of like a season of TV all at once, 13 episodes all at once, right? You're not going to remember the details, but you don't need to. You just need to remember the overall thrust of the story. And so I think what's happened is the story has not been great. Welcome back, Rob. I was having to faff there for a while.
I know. I saw that my screen froze. I could still hear the thing, but just the internet goblins have been real. Did you see the other night they took down, like, Peter had a blackout in the middle and I had to run up from the shop and take over, and then Emily was getting crashes. Like my stream earlier. Oh
yeah. And then you interrupted me in my train of thought because I was trying to
I'm
cover
so sorry. I really am terribly sorry about that. My
You're
word,
fine.
this is frustrating. Internet being internet, the little internet gremlins. Okay. So, continuing on.
His response.
I mean, I think at first he was a little surprised, but then he said, okay.
Did you tell him where you wanted him to shoot you?
Yes, sir.
Where'd you tell him you wanted him to shoot you?
In the head?
And did you tell him how you were going to arrange that? What was going to be the logistics of that?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I told him to follow me out, and that I would make a flat tire, and he would go past me and turn around and come back and do it.
And did he follow you out?
He did.
Now, where did he get?
So, we're not going to go too much further into this part because a lot of it's just it's his personal attorney who's leading him through a list of questions that seem very, very just the right answers. I don't know how to read half the answers, half the questions. I don't know how to read any of this scene. You have the defense attorney who is openly asking questions in a cross-examination format to law enforcement for questions that should not be asked. Like, none of this should be happening. What is occurring in this moment? Where did this trial go? This is the problem.
I don't know. What are we trying to adjudicate again? Are we still on the response to the motion to quash the request for the interrogatories in the boat case? Is that where we're at now? I'm so confused.
So he goes through a lot of this narrative, right? He goes through a ton of this narrative, and the prosecutor has one final question, which I thought was actually pretty decent to bring it all back. So the narrative ends up being completely lies. It's all lies. Well, not the repetition. I'm not sure how it's going to play one way or the other. He says he wants to end his life. I'm going to try and give you guys a summary of how I feel about some of that debate as soon as we get finished with this video analysis. And then it's uncomfortable. If this kicks me off, I am going to be
if you're about done with
bad. Come on, come back.
No idea where the gun is.
I do not.
Okay, and you did not shoot.
Waters, I need you to stand up, please.
Okay. Go off the side of the road and something at you. All right, gentlemen. Well, I know our time's okay.
in just a couple minutes, and then
We are finishing the recording with Richard Alex Murdaugh, his attorneys Dick Harpoolian and Jim Griffith, and Special Agent Ryan Kelly, Special Agent Joe Morrow all day. It is now 4:58 on Monday, September 13th. Thank you all, gentlemen.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Special Agent Kelly, is that a complete conversation that you had with Alex Murdaugh on September 13th, 2021?
Yes, it is.
Prior to that conversation, over the course of the 911 call, the ambulance, and multiple interviews at the hospital, did Alex Murdaugh ever mention or identify Curtis Edward Smith at all until his lies about the side of the road were exposed?
No.
Good question, leading, but Dick said he would lead him.
Alex Murdaugh ever say that there was any risk or threat to Buster?
He said no. No, he did not. He actually denied it when we asked.
Did Alex Murdaugh say that Curtis Eddie Smith had anything to do with the murders of Moselle?
He denied it when we asked.
And is there any evidence that Curtis Edward Smith had anything to do with Moselle?
None whatsoever.
Boom. Good questions. Way to end that examination. Perfect way to handle that testimony, which I imagine cross is going to be given tomorrow. And I imagine that's where the defense is going to go directly. They're going to go straight at that question of Curtis Edward Reeves or Curtis Reeves, Cousin Eddie, and whether he had anything to do with it. Here's the thing, and Kurt, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one. I see this cutting three different ways. Do you want to hear the pro prosecution or pro defense way first?
Well, I would say the pro prosecution way is consciousness of guilt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they're trying to squeeze it into.
Yeah. Liar, liar who lies, consciousness of guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't believe a single thing about his story. You can't believe the confession he gave after, or you can't believe the narrative he gave in the police car, because this was the narrative he gave to the 911 caller. And then you hear him give a different narrative in this call, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So that's pro prosecution. And I think that from a pure human standpoint, that sells pretty hard. Like, he is made out to be a rather substantial liar and manipulator during that call.
Yep.
Here's how I think it's pro defense. And here's how, so there's two left. One is neutral, coin flip, and the other is pro defense. Do you want to do the defense first and then neutral next?
Yeah.
Pro defense. If you have a single juror, one juror that is sitting here and saying in their head through all of this testimony, who has come to the conclusion that they don't believe that he could have done it alone. Just one. That call and the involving a third party to do an act like this, that as a juror is going to make the juror dig their heels in. And now
does it also play a little bit in the prosecution's hand, though, because he knows how to hire someone to do the killings.
Yeah. And that's where I was going with the prosecution. He knows how to hire someone to do it. But from a defense standpoint, based on the law, you have to have Alex Murdaugh pulling the trigger on both weapons and committing both murders. Pulling the trigger. Yeah. Conspiracy, separate charge in this jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And the judge even hinted at that. The judge this morning was going, this is sounding like conspiracy. And if the judge is thinking that after the evidence, you can't tell me one of the jurors hasn't made it to that conclusion yet.
Yeah. Conspiracy with party unknown. That's always a fun case to try to prosecute. That'd be good.
Oh,
you want to prove a conspiracy by proving an agreement with someone you can't prove who they are or that they exist.
It is wild. It is wild. And that goes back to the investigation. Like, what would we have had if they had walked the 5 miles to Alameda? It's not impossible. What would we have had if they had searched Alameda that night? Either exclusionary evidence, didn't find anything there, or evidence that convicts him. But we don't have that. And the problem that you run into in the legal system is that from the standpoint of American law, you cannot burden shift. You are not allowed to burden shift. You are not allowed to say, as was suggested yesterday, which was really, really, really horrible.
No,
you are not allowed to
lost
say.
I would have lost my shit as the judge. I would have lost my shit.
Oh, you are not allowed to suggest that the absence of a finding itself is evidence of guilt. You cannot do that. You cannot say that because we didn't find it, he could have done it this way. You are precluded from doing that.
Well, motions in worse though, because they said, well, the defendant didn't provide us the list of suspects. They didn't provide us the list of like,
or the cooler argument. The whole was there a cooler in the back of that car? Or was there a cooler on the property? I don't know. Were there other guns on the property? I don't know. Were there sled agents on the property? Did one of the boot tracks match a sled agent? Can I now then suggest that the sled agent did this? That's the same logic. We do not do that in this country. And it's frustrating because he's a lying liar who lies. And yeah, he's a fucking really shady guy. Everything about him is horrible. I don't agree with all of this stuff. And I can see a jury convicting him based on no other evidence than the fact. But from purely lawyer state, like the lawyer position, it scares me that we can get a conviction based on that without not just like some hypothetical more or understanding that there might be different theories out there.
Yeah.
The state was allowed to suggest without any supporting evidence, and actually without evidence to the contrary, that he could have had a 5-minute window on Alameda to hide the guns. They were allowed to say that yesterday. If I was a judge, I would have excused the jury, pulled all the parties up there, and ripped them a new one and said, you just put on a witness, your own witness, Ms. Shelley, who said that from the time that she saw headlights on that property, got the phone call from him and opened the door, was almost nothing. And that she observed him the entire time that she was there. You just implied something that was an inconsistent narrative from one of your own witnesses that you have no other evidence to back up.
Right. And like that goes to the question earlier, because the defense asked her, well, do you think it was more than 20 minutes on the property in total? Because they asked her, did you mean just 20 minutes with his mom, or did you mean 20 minutes on the property as a whole? And the witness said, oh, I meant 20 minutes as a whole. It's like, you sure that, there wasn't more than that, it wasn't just 20 minutes with it and there was more waiting time? No, 20 minutes as a whole. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and under this legal system, you need more than just the idea that there are gaps in the lies to convict someone of murder. That's a problem. So let me hit some of these super chats. Kurt, you're free to stick around, or you are free to duck out, anything you want to do. But I'm going to wrap this up.
I'll stay in case your stream drops again and I have to help carry you through.
I tell you what, man, the whole like me sprinting up to try and grab Peter's stream when he was offline after that power outage was wild. But yeah. So Brad Walker, thank you very much. The defense to me played this and the prosecution magically. They know Eddie is a mess of a witness. I think the prosecution they have a loop to close. They cannot leave the cousin Eddie thing out there in the wild. If cousin Eddie is not a loop, a question that is answered, if they don't bring that back, they're in trouble. They can bring it back. I just don't know how they can do it without calling cousin Eddie. And that prospect scares me immensely from both sides. Moonraiser, what if the jury stood up to the judge and said, we want to be able to take notes or we're going to walk out? The judge simply looks back at them and says, I have bailiffs. They will hold you where you are. Like you don't get to do that. Once you are impaneled as the jury, you are impaneled. The judge has the ability to hold jurors in contempt. The judge can actually hold a juror in contempt and put them back in the holding cell. They don't do it, but they could, because you're now in their court. And you don't get to question you don't get to question how the Constitution is interpreted to you.
Yeah. Taking notes has two problems with it. In case for people asking, like, why not allow notes? Taking notes has two problems with it, and which is kind of the same problem in two different ways. When you're taking notes, you're paying less attention to what you're hearing. It's very difficult for most people to take notes and listen to what they're hearing at the same time. So they tend to miss things that they're taking notes. And as a twin to that problem, when people take notes, they tend to over-rely on their notes and tend to under-rely on anything else that they might have heard. Because it's like, well, the notes are now God, right? The notes are now the authoritative thing. So they tend to, if it's not in the notes, tend not to hold it in as much importance as the thing they wrote down. So it changes the nature of the very active recording, changes the nature of what is remembered and what is relied on. And so that's part of the reason why. It's not free. And, there's counters to that. Obviously, you have 12 jurors and they're all taking different notes and things. And so they might be able to cross-check each other's notes and things like that. But then again, they can cross-check each other's memories. So you're back to the same sort of underlying problem and sort of how that works. So, and also for whatever it's worth, the historical reality was jurors don't take notes. The trend has been to change that, but that's the trend. So the jury system was invented without notes, not for least of reasons that because, well, for a long time, a lot of people weren't literate, including jurors. So taking notes was not part of the system.
Yeah. Nine Sales Gal, you mentioned previously that you don't agree with fingerprint. I didn't say fingerprint. Hair follicle is what I said. Fingerprint has sufficient markers to get you to within a very, very, very high degree of probability. Hair follicle and tool markings, not so much. due to the larger room for human error. How do you feel about recreation and blood splatter? That is more argument than it is science. And you will see that both sides will use that testimony to their advantage. That Sarah chick, thank you very much. I think Maggie pulled the attacker's hair, and that's why the second shot was low, and how she got hair and DNA under her nails from an unknown male. After the second shot, she ran and was chased down and killed. That might be possible. Vez, thank you very much. What if Alex Murdaugh just wanted to wound Paul first shot and claim it's the link to the boat case, then trip on the threshold and fall, shooting the second one by accident while tripping? It's a feasible thing, and kill Maggie because she saw it. These are probabilities. Mike Dorado, thank you very much. The last person who will testify for the defense will be Dr. Spiegel. God, no. He will explain how AM took 50,000 a week in pills. Oh, God, no. And somehow is a narcissist. That's how this noodle of a trial will end.
Dr. Spiegel makes an appearance.
Oh, no.
I'm giving up the game.
Dr. Spiegel was the doctor from the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial who was all the opinions.
A delight, a treat.
A. Washburn, why did no one say that he could have fallen, which would have given an upward shot angle? You would have seen a lot more dust and particulates, and also they don't really want to do it because they want to kind of maintain the theory that he was wearing what he was wearing when they got there. There's the thing in the prosecution, they can't decide what they want to do. They don't know whether to say he was wearing blue shirt and khakis and did the murders in that, or whether it was khaki shorts and white shirt and somehow washed the shirt and changed it out. They have not chosen a theory they want to go with. And if they were to try and make that argument, that's choosing a theory. Ellen, not Sarah Lee, thank you. At the height of Alex, I'm assuming 6'4" from everyone around him, that angle would be tough. Moffat on money is 6'3", and I'm 5'9", and he uses my head as an armrest when we're both standing. Doesn't make sense. It's hard to explain. I think the explanation I gave about feigning, setting the shotgun down and resting it on the ground is perhaps, in my opinion, one of the only ways he could do it at his height. The falling down puts him too far away from the head. That puts him, if he falls down, the muzzle is now 4 feet from the head. And then you've got stippling and all of the other stuff.
I do share the consensus with the standard shotgun. It'd be pretty hard to shoot yourself in that position.
The whole self thing, that's Ryan Amanda Barrett, could A of them shot from his back after a fall? I think I just answered that one. Thank you. Gingy Probs, my spatial intelligence ain't perfect, but would these angles be consistent with someone shooting whilst atop an ATV?
Yeah, no. I like the drive-by ATV theory.
The ATV
spinners on those things.
Yeah, the great. ATV makes no sense. I have been in those side-by-sides and on ATVs. That theory, the idea of the ATV being the place from which the shot was taken, makes zero sense.
Rob, I think you and I need to go on an adventure. I think we need to rent ourselves an ATV
and just shoot stuff.
Do ourselves a drive-by ATV. We'll put it to some music, upload it to the YouTube. It'll be great.
We can try that. Sure. I'll shoot like pumpkins. Yeah. Off an ATV or targets. We can do that.
Yeah.
Here for years. Thank you. Why can't jurors take notes? We answered that one. Ryanman YYC. So if Murdaugh takes the stand, what are the odds that the state tries to put a weapon in his hands? He's not 100%. Taking the stand. If he does, they're going to ask him to.
Oh yeah, and they're going to ask him about all the financial crimes.
Oh yeah,
what's he going to do?
Yeah, he's not taking the stand. I'm sorry, unless he has an all-out knockdown, drag-out fight with his attorneys, and the attorney threatens to resign, and he says you can't, and then like that would be the only circumstance he takes the stand.
He'd be right at this point. They're stuck with him.
Yeah. Gab Liz, if cell data dump was good evidence, why did it come up on cross and not testified to? You mean the GPS, the GM data? The defense knew that was good for their position. They brought it up. The prosecution didn't. That I think the idea of him paying somebody or having someone help is not far afield. It's a reasonable probability. I would say that you are reasonable in your doubt if that is your doubt. And I think the GM OnStar data supports that. Why did he not call Buster ASAP to see if Buster was okay? Because he knew Buster was fine. I think that kind of goes into my previous kind of statement. And that goes into the last question was asked by the prosecutor. You didn't have any fear for Buster. And he said no. It's a good question. Whiskey 77. I could convince you, Kurt, did it if I talked about it long enough. You can come up with 1,000 what ifs, but have no proof. I have told people any number of times, and I think Kurt's probably heard me say it ad nauseum. If you give me your cell phone, I could make you a murderer or a saint, depending on the day.
Probably
Everything is about the context in which this stuff is argued, especially inter-party communications. So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. Darks Arts by Adrian. Robin, Kurt, if you were the prosecution, what is your first improvement you'd make? What would you improve as the defense? I would actually lay out, like I just did the demonstration. Like I did the whole, like, if I prop the gun on the floor and was give them something. Ask your scene reconstruction expert if this hypothetical works with their analysis. You've drilled it with them before. They can say yes, and then you put it in the mind of the juror. And get off of all of the finances and tangential stuff. Get me back to the timeline. That's where my questions are. I know, bad guy, bad things. I know. Get me to the timeline and close the loop on Cousin Eddie. That's how I would do it. Anything to add, Kurt?
No, have a story, have a narrative. That'd be the number one thing I do. Figure out what my story is.
Yeah.
And tell the story and connect the dots along the way to tell the story.
Which is what's supposed to happen from the very beginning. You're supposed to start your case from your close. Which is your story.
Storytelling goes a long way.
It's wild. As a defense, the last question was, as the defense, what would I improve? Don't try to be everyone's friend. Stop. Play defense and play it hard. Get in the paint, box people out. Stop trying to win people over. Do your job. Jim Griffin had one of the most effective cross-examinations I have seen in a murder trial in a long time yesterday.
It was great.
And you know how he did it? He didn't pull punches and try to play cute. He walked into it with Marion Proctor. That was the worst cross that you can do. You pass that witness 10 out of 10. But when he had the SLED agent on the stand, he didn't pull punches and he made points. That's how the defense makes up ground. Flightless. Alex was far too generous, giving the state access to his property and phones to investigate whenever. That's not something a guilty person does. That is his argument. I think you can weigh that the other side too. Chris and M96, how long Alex Murdaugh and moms before calling Shelly, trash day at mom's and neighbors, clean up at the cabin near kennels or deer processing area, which is right there. It's possible. I need the timeline guy. Why have we not seen the timeline guy? Gingy Probs, there you are. Thank you. There are so many wrongful convictions based on similarly bad circumstantial evidence because they can't afford this vigorous defense. It sucks that advocating for them may mean exonerating AM. Gingy Probs makes a really good point. Trials of the Century, Innocence Chronicles. I've chronicled a lot of them on my channel and Scott's channel. Go back through and look at some of those convictions.
Yeah.
Just watch them.
I will take note here that for many of the cases with wrongful convictions, there was a time when the people, perhaps especially the prosecutors, but the public at large, thought a lot of those people were very, very guilty. So advocating for AM in some sense is advocating for the wrongfully convicted, because in some sense, they were and are in the exact same position. You know, people thought they were guilty. They thought they were guilty and they came to a conclusion. And now that isn't the case all the time. I don't want to be misunderstood, because on my own channel, we've definitely caught cases with prosecutors who have done some really shady shit. So there's definitely the really shady shit file, but there's also just we really thought it was the guy. We really thought this was the guy. We were sure it was the guy. We convicted him and it wasn't the guy. So I think, you know, in some sense, remembering the wrongfully convicted is exactly why we should be doing this for Alex Murdaugh. And it's like our impulse to make an exception for him is a lot of the reason why a lot of those people are in jail in the first place.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Kurt, this one's for you, my friend.
Yes. Hey, aren't you located in Texas at the minute? Yes, I am. I am currently located in Austin. I want to know who the law nerd stream that will be covering the Caitlin Armstrong case. I think it started in June. It's really wild. Murder of a pro cyclist in Austin. Oh yeah, I might cover that as well. It just depends on what looks interesting at any given time. And, in terms of also where I think the need is in terms of coverage. If they change their mind on Daybell Vallow, I'll cover Daybell Vallow. If they don't, then I'll cover something else. But I think Daybell Vallow is definitely the case I was looking the most forward to cover. That's the Idaho cult murder case with the books, with the post-apocalyptic Mormon stuff. Really interesting case there with the murder of the kids. But yeah,
The creepy one. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So
The thing about
they're
the
a lot
cases
of,
that we
they're a lot of fun.
Thank you, Peachy Patty. That's very much appreciated. The thing about the cases that are like the ones that you want to cover, Murdaugh, we knew was going to be wild. Did you ever really anticipate it would be this?
I was hoping for a lot more, to be honest. I
More?
especially based on the preliminaries, I had high hopes this was going to be a really strongly competent case with two really great legal teams, and I was disappointed greatly and
The
disheartened.
lawyering has been funny. Lawyering has been weird.
And now I have to decide whether or not I want to resume the stream tomorrow, because I was planning on going back to gavel to gavel coverage when the defense picked up its case, at least for a while, out of no other reason than fairness. So if that's not going to happen tomorrow, then I guess I'm waiting until Tuesday. I don't know.
I think if you hear like Cousin Eddie is the one called to the stand, if
Oh,
Cousin
Lord.
Eddie is called to the stand, shit, I might drop everything in the street, just because I need to see his testimony and like actually like just move everything off of my calendar and watch that if he testifies. I don't know, but yeah, I'll jump on with you if you cover.
I
it.
want the Navy SEAL guy.
No, we don't
The
want the Navy
sunflower
SEAL
seed.
guy.
The sunflower
no, it's
seeds.
the
And the
FBI.
Black
It was,
Panthers.
it was FBI. The FBI Black Panthers conspiracy to kill all.
No,
the
it was
people.
also a Navy SEAL team in there.
Was it?
That was part. Yeah, that was also there. It was he was recruited by the FBI to be part of a Navy SEALs team to kill the Black Panthers.
How are we at day 19 of this trial?
It was supposed to be over last week, Rob. It was
I know.
supposed to be great. It was supposed to be over on the 10th. How's that working out?
It's not. Della Sandra, thank you very much. Watch Kurt's view on civil law last night. Best. I agree with Kurt. So smart. And I cried laughing. A show I'll watch over and over. Giving to you, Rob, because of Kurt. Thank you, Della. That is very nice of you. And thank you to Kurt for jumping on with me and having some fun going over this case. Oh, yeah. I have to check that out. I might do that when I jump off here. Last night?
Yeah, where I did the review of the sled guy's cross.
Oh,
Just went through that and
cross,
broke that
man.
down and had fun with it.
And here's the thing. I can appreciate that cross-examination without making any finding of guilt one way or the other. That was a good damn cross.
Yeah.
That was,
might have told a few inconsistencies to the grand jury, but that's okay. It's not like it's a big deal or anything.
Yeah. Matthew Self, thank you very much. Definitely catch Kurt's stream from last night on the cross of Adrian Owens. It was beautiful so much. I wanted to watch it live on Good Logic and a rewatch with Uncivil Law. Get over there. I think it's a great idea.
I really appreciate all the compliments. Oh, I feel loved. Thank you.
That's awesome. 9 Inch Nails Cow looks like Dean from Supernatural. I think that was in response to The Last Witness. Mav, I can't help but think that AM is giving racist vibes. He called a carboy white. This is the Deep South, and some of his reactions to the judge makes me wonder if he resents black men. I'm not going to infer anything upon any of these people as far as racial motives one way or the other. Yeah. I will say it is the Deep South, and there's been a lot of language that's been odd, including a lot of gestures by the prosecutor who has walked up to the stand when women have been on the stand and squeezed their shoulder, suggesting they might want to respond a certain way. So I will say that there's probably a fair bit of misogyny, racism, and any number of things, but I don't think it's unique to this particular
It's Southern.
case.
It's Southern. You got to roll.
Yeah. Dana Parfait,
I don't think it's quite fair to say it's misogyny and racism. Maybe it's just because I grew up with that community. But I've lived all over the country. I've lived in Pennsylvania. I've lived in Ohio. Lived in Virginia, South Carolina. Lived in Texas. I've lived in many different parts. I don't think. I don't. I just think. I don't know. I just don't think it's. Maybe it's because it's like a fish being in water, but it just doesn't strike me as misogynistic. It just strikes me as a slightly different style of doing things.
Dude,
but I
the
don't know.
the squeezing of the shoulder of the women witnesses, like
It's a little. It's a little.
I would
familiar.
get immediately admonished, and just the judge would probably send the jury out and like.
Well, Fairfax.
Rip me a new one.
Although to be fair, I mean, if you were trying somewhere else in Virginia, if you're trying in a different part of the state,
Green or
you
Orange
might be
County,
that might be perfectly normal.
and it's still creepy.
If you're trying
to
a
me.
more rural part of Virginia,
I know, it's still creepy to me. It's still one of those things where I get it.
Yeah.
I do understand. It's like, okay, in those jurisdictions, I am uncomfortable by it. If opposing counsel was doing that to a witness in my presence, regardless of the jurisdiction I was in,
okay.
I'm
being massively outvoted by the chat, so I'll just shut up now.
That's not no. Here's the thing: if I'm in a courtroom and it's in Orange County and I'm watching two other attorneys that are there,
yeah,
and I say Orange County, Virginia,
yeah, right,
I wouldn't be surprised to see it. If I am in front of the bar, I am uncomfortable enough about it, then I'm probably asking the judge to tell counsel not to do that. And then I might also face embarrassment. The judge might call me out and say, well, Mr. Morton, that's just how we do things here. We're just a friendly bunch. And then I would probably have some remarks that were internalized in my head that I wouldn't say out loud to the judge in open court. I know that like you're probably comfortable with it, but have you talked to the people that are having their shoulders pinched? Because I can tell you, if I was on the stand and I had someone pinch my shoulders, I would not be very friendly to them.
Shoulders, Rob.
You're allowed to. You have the pass. You can come. You can do the squeeze shoulder. That's fine. You're allowed. You're not the prosecutor in a case that's an attorney I've never met before. Oh, part of it made me uncomfortable. Bop it. So far, do I think Alex is responsible for the deaths? Absolutely. Do I think the prosecution put the gun in his hands? Nope. Will the jury convict? I have no fluffing idea. I think that's kind of where I am. Does he have a role? I think so. Is it him pulling the trigger? I don't think they have beyond a reasonable doubt. How the jury's going to decide? Who the hell knows?
I think my end conclusion is I'll be a little disappointed if the jury convicts, and I'll have such warm feelings to Schadenfreude if they don't, and I'll laugh really, really hard.
Because it's the prosecution's game to lose.
Yeah.
They had all the power. Everything from the very beginning. Lori Harlow, he left at 9:06, wouldn't have heard 7 gunshots. It's a good point. Sandra Ramirez, at the beginning of the trial today, the lawyers were talking about how they agreed not to object during their private meetings. If I understood that correctly, what are your thoughts about this? That was to speed the trial up. I think Dick Harpootlian has a timetable with his experts that he's trying to navigate, and this trial is costing his client a lot. And if his client doesn't have the money, then he is out of pocket a lot because he cannot get out of trial at this moment. So this might just be a way of speeding things along. Lauren L., thank you. Human nature makes it hard. We can feel how we do, but aren't on the jury. Tinsley's comment, no jury in Hampton will rule against Alex Murdaugh, was more important than we think. Awful man, but easy to see the jury not wanting to be associated. That's a fair statement. We are not the jurors. Stephanie 1208, after listening to that very shady interrogation over the phone, I wouldn't put it past any of the 25 lawyers he called to come to the house that night. Could have taken evidence with them to hide for him. That's
a good friend. Rob and I are friends, but we're not in I'll help you hide the body.
I'm not there with Kurt. Yeah. Like, no. That's a lot.
Maybe later. Life goals.
I can see speculation down that regard. I can see people doing it, but it's kind of intense. Marie G, perhaps during the financial trial, we'll actually get to see murder trial. That's a good comment. Melanie Search started watching it over again from day 3 to see if it makes more sense. And there's so much I don't even remember watching the first time. A mess. I know. Mr. RN, why do neither sides reserve the right to recall witnesses? They don't have to with this judge. They don't have to exclude witnesses. They're all just there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. There's no reason to do that because there's no sequestration. They're all just there. Anytime. I'll just call this guy. Oh, he's right there. No problem. Let's go.
Well, I mean, you
Okay.
just heard this person testify to it. Well, how did
I
you
sure
know that?
did.
Because I was watching with you.
Because I was there. I was right there as it happened 5 seconds ago. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's how we rolled out here.
Della Sandor, get rid of Nightbot preventing me from giving you money. Della, I apologize for Nightbot and the slights that he has inflicted upon the chat. I will say that it makes it easier for me to look when there are 5,500 of you here, which thank you very much. If you are here, please hit the like button. I would love to see this video get up to about 5,000 likes. It would be awesome. And if you are a first time visitor to the channel, or it's been your second time you like the content, please subscribe and do that to my friend Kurt as well. But Nightbot has been great in helping me actually see the chat and not just like a blur of
I'm
emojis.
only about 1,800 away from 125,000, so you can help me cross over that little.
Let's do
next
that.
milestone.
That'd be
Get
awesome.
125,000. Be nice.
Yeah. So I'm sorry for Nightbot and the frustration he might cause, or she. I'm not going to gender Nightbot because he's a bot. She's a bot. They're a bot. But Nightbot helps me manage the chat. Tiffany Bernier, thank you very much. I think 50,000 includes bribes and blackmails. I wouldn't be surprised. Atacor, maybe Cousin Eddie is helping with other jobs over the years, keeping him silent. Whatever it is, it's not him mowing the lawn. That's for damn sure. Smiles of Texas.
It is a big lawn.
That's
I
true.
mean, it's 1,700 acres. It's a
It
big
was
lawn.
$1,500 a week to the caretakers that took over. Yeah. So $1,500 a week to mow the lawn and take care of the property. Smiles of Texas. I just have a feeling AM might being the cool dad and his boys and their partying. Could all three AM, BM, and PM be using drugs? It's possible. I haven't heard evidence to that regard, but I'm not going to say it's not possible. Sandra Ramirez, thank you. If he wanted to end things, why would he need his medical insurance card? Sus to me. I don't know the answer to that question. Tay Logan, if AM is going to prison for life, why is he fighting this if he's guilty? Who's paying for his defense? Tay, I will tell you this. There is going away to prison for life. There's going away to financial prison for life under federal indictment, which I think he's also maybe possibly thinking that the feds will plead him out and the state goes moot. But then there's also the whole thing like of being convicted of killing your wife and kid. And there's, let me put it this way. If hypothetically speaking, I did not do those things to my family members, there is not a dollar I wouldn't spend to defend myself. I'm not saying that's his motivation. I'm just saying I would be fighting it. I don't care what else is happening in my life. Baby Gator, he will lose because he's a liar, cheater, and stole money, which is wrong. That is wrong. I don't know if he's going to lose on the murder, though. Rachel Hope, Burnson, Englehart, thank you. Hi, guys. Rob, love your insights. Keep it up, uncivil. Love your work, too. Does anyone know if the small cabin on Moselle was ever searched? Apparently it was, just not that night. Chelsea Jones, thank you very much. I agree, Rob, at this point, if they find him guilty, that is so frightening. I actually believe he was absolutely never and knew what happened, and I could never convict him. I believe he was absolutely there and knew what happened, and I could never convict him. Because that's the charge is first, the charge is murder. Like that's the charge. You can't go outside the bounds of what the state has asked you to do. That is then you, if you convict him and beyond what the state has asked you to accuse, if you convict him because he's a bad person and you believe he was involved, but the state didn't charge him with murder, his life is on your shoulders, not the state. It's on your shoulders. You have judged him. So you need to go back and listen to the caregiver testimony. She said, going to the smokehouse. That's interesting because that also brings me back to the cross-examination of Agent Owen, who had every opportunity to ask Alex if he could go over to Alameda and did not investigate. And the thing is, you cannot infer from the failure to investigate that something nefarious happened. You cannot do that. You had the opportunity to investigate. The suggestion alone, I think, is improper. Erica Rosales, thank you very much. Melanie, thank you. Miss Shelley said it took 5 minutes. Yep, saw that one earlier. A. O'Connor, I have a difficult time watching because the lawyers are unorganized. Prosecution doesn't even object when defendant's leading. Is this really the odd in the South? No one objects to leading. No one objects to leading. Hudson Hill, did they measure out the height of the second shotgun shot angle to show that the shooter was that low? They did. It's, if you go back in the stream, I actually show the cone that has the projected angle. Alex F, to me, whether it was one or two people, the first shot assumed it took out Paul. Next, then Maggie was next. Then they realized Paul was a live shot, as if they looked the final shot at Maggie. That one is a stretch, because that assumes Paul is standing still for the entire time shots are being fired at Maggie, and is standing relatively still in the frame of that door. I think that's a stretch. Lisa, thank you very much. This guy wasn't brought in till late last year. It seems more appropriate. They wanted to charge Alex no matter lack of evidence. It's interesting. Rebecca D lied about being at the kennel at 2. Tried to make the witnesses lie. 3. Maggie's blood in the steering wheel. 4. Dog in the kennel. 5. Hose put away. 6. Alex crouched down when firing. 7. Almeida's smokehouse and equals family annihilator. Rebecca, I respect your decision. I can see how a juror can reach that conclusion. I do. I can see how a juror can reach that conclusion. I am telling you, based on my review of the evidence, I see a couple of flaws in your 1 through 7. I see at least a few things that you have completely right. I think some of those in there are debatable.
Yeah,
Mary Malarkey.
I think again, like the question is a little bit, what's the question we're supposed to be asking? And so, like, is 1 through 7 reasonable? Yes.
Yep.
Is it plausible? Yes. Is it persuasive?
Yep.
Yes. But like the question we're supposed to be asking
is there a 1.5 or a 2.5 or any reasonable alternative?
Is it beyond a reasonable doubt? That's the question we're supposed to be asking. So, like, do you have enough confidence in that to say, yes, I'm beyond a reasonable doubt? And I'm like, I can see how you get there. So I'm not saying you're unreasonable. I get it, but I have reasonable doubts as to that. And so I suppose the question is whether or not you do. And, like, do you really think beyond a reasonable doubt? I don't know.
And some people are going to feel this way. I can find, if you give me all 7 of those elements, I can find a reasonable doubt included in there. And I think I can argue it pretty persuasively. When we get to closing arguments, it's going to be really interesting.
And, if we were sitting on a jury, it's possible that, we just wouldn't be able to agree. It happens. That's why you have hung juries. You just can't get everyone to the same place. And it doesn't necessarily mean that anyone's wrong. I think one of the reasons in our system that we want unanimity is because we want everyone to agree beyond a reasonable doubt. So, like, the idea that a few of us can get to beyond reasonable doubt is inherently,
it's not enough.
Like, there's a reason it's not a jury of one, in other words, right? The question isn't, can one of us get to there? It's, can all of us get there? And I think that's one of the safeguards we have for that reason. So, God bless the USA.
Indeed. Della, if you're still in the chat, someone forwarded me your previous chat. The super chat wouldn't let me send this. With the shooting coming at the lower angle, do you think the shooter hid the guns under something like a dog bed, bent down to fix something, then grabbed one of the guns from underneath? That's a possibility. I think that fits more in the camp of my speculation number 2 or 3 than speculation number 1, but it's there. Magical Mirror, Bubba, call to the stand tomorrow. Bubba needs vindication. I love Bubba.
No, it's all Bubba's fault. It's all Bubba's fault.
We can't
revenge by chicken for death of Rooster.
The Rooster was a battlefield loss of the general. The Marshall. Did you see my tweet? That was so much fun. Just that one part. But
yesterday I went into my story about Clock Chandelier and instantly lost 500 people watching my channel. So that was good.
Girl Ree really thought the state had more evidence. Maybe got spoiled with Depp versus Heard theatrics and Waukesha DA lawyering the case. This is a hard case. It was a hard case from the very beginning. Diana, what if AM didn't take a nap, took that time to prep the car, clothes, transport guns, clothes, only had to take a shower? That's a possibility. Karate Cat Mom, haven't you all debated double jeopardy and murder for hire? We've done that. Dana Parfait, thank you very much for that very generous super chat. And Dana Parfait, again, thank you again for the generous super chat. Love when I get to catch you live. I'm a civil litigation defense paralegal in New Orleans, and I feel like we share the same brain most of the time. So many of the same opinions. Much love. Dana, thank you very much for being here. I very much appreciate And you know what? Just think both sides of the argument any given time. Like, I'm quite literally, like, my brain goes to, how would I argue this in either direction? I did that earlier in the live stream. I argued on behalf of the state, and I argued to a plausible finding of guilt. Whether I have the evidence to back that argument up is a different story. We will see what comes up in the rest of the trial, but you have to be able to argue both sides. Nanner, can you tell the attorney to get his hands off you? You can, absolutely. 9-inch nail scout, sending vibes of being too comfortable with the witness or guiding the testimony. The shoulder thing, yeah, kind of. Susie Wood, Rob, I'm in North Carolina, and touchy is the South. However, in today's times, no touchy. You may end up with assault charges, although bless their heart, they can't help the culture. That goes in line. I'm not saying it makes people uncomfortable. If you're in that setting, you have every right to tell the person, please don't touch me. Or if I'm an attorney and it makes me uncomfortable and I'm in front of that bar, I can ask the judge to please request that he not approach the witness. You haven't seen a lot of that happen. The judge has stepped in every now and then and said, y'all are having a lovely conversation. If you wouldn't mind going back to the stand, I have appreciated when that has happened.
That's been fun.
Britt Flip, thank you. By chance, y'all notice Alex lipping, "This isn't good" to a lawyer during roadside 911 call. I didn't see that. I can go back and look though. Sarah Bellum, thank you. I'm a member. Yay, I figured it out. Thanks, Mav. How much do you think AM is helping his team behind the scenes with the defense? Love you, Robin Kurt. He would have to be pretty damn involved because he can't allow them to walk into a trap.
Yeah.
You can't ask the question you don't know the answer to. Not in a case like this. No way. This case is really careful. Prior addict, like, thank you, Meta. Prior addict, like AM, might take a big dollar figure and the dose. First, as you take OPs, your body builds a tolerance. The more he takes, the more he needs, and isn't enough to be high just to function. Dealers will use addiction against you're charging big money. That's a lot of opiates, Amanda. I get your point, and I actually kind of thought the math through a little bit.
I'm gonna open up Kurt's Discount Opiate Emporium because apparently there's a way to undercut the market here.
That's a lot of money on a weekly basis, Amanda. And I get your point. I do get your point. There could be overcharging because the dealer is selling too much. It's bringing too much heat to the dealer because it's too much. Could be that Alex is also distributing. I don't know the
Will
answer
you help
to
me
that
write
question.
marketing copy for my opiate Emporium?
No. I'm
Welcome
saying
to Uncivil Law Discount Opiate Emporium.
Uncivil Law Discount Opiate Emporium. My word. Sue, thank you. Question: what about the lawyer that handles all the evidence? Doesn't that contaminate it so they will never get tested again if they need to? Absolutely correct. That has been insanely weird. Why are we touching the evidence with our bare hands? You know, there's a crazy thing that happened in the 60s. In the 60s, we first started developing DNA testing. And we had these methods of testing DNA that were very outdated. And what we did was we handled the evidence with our gloved hands. Gloved hands. And we put it back in little baggies. We sealed it up. We put it in the box and we let it sit. And then decades later, when new processes of testing stuff came about, we then said, you know what? New processes are here. They're trustworthy. Can we reopen that box and take this out again with our gloved hands and test it again? My word, new developments and new results were reached in trials. But what happens when I sit there with my bare damn hands and just old spit, just that part made me angry.
I had to look this up because what you reminded me something. Remind me of the Phantom of Hera LeBron, the woman without a face, the hypothesized unknown female serial killer from DNA evidence found in numerous crime scenes in Austria, France, and Germany in 1993 to 2009. And you know what it turned out to be?
What?
It was a woman who was working in the factory.
No.
Who was making the cotton swabs and was contaminating them. And her DNA therefore wound up on all the crime scene DNA swabs. Yeah. Good times.
There's a big box of gloves right there at the witness stand. It's right there. It is not hard. Okay, guys, I know it's getting late, and I know that you guys are sending super chats in. I can't get to all of these. I'm going to try and get to some of them because I do need to. I said it's going to be here for an hour. It's now 2 hours and 30 minutes. That is about as far as I can possibly make it. I grew up with John Meadows, family of men like him. They use touch as a way to get someone. That's possible. Yep. Every time in Nightbot, I think of Nightmen cometh. It's always say, yep. Good comment. Della, thank you. I'm in PW County, Prince William County in Virginia. Recent juror, lived all over West Virginia, Florida. Prosecution didn't prove the case. Love you, fellow Virginia. Got through Nightbot. Yay. Thank you, Della. Thank you for the very, very, very nice super chats and contributions to the stream all night. Thank you very much. Nightbot, lovely friend. Yep, we do. For the kids, simply living for the legal debates on YouTube and between the lawyers. This is why I love LawTube. It's great to hear the lawyers agree and disagree because you hear the discussions. Catherine Clark, if hung jury, how long to retry for speedy trial? Takes a while. You have to recharge it. You have to go back to the grand jury. Mav, I just don't understand why they didn't also charge him with conspiracy to cover multiple shooters. You can't have alternate theories as the prosecution. That leads to, that is inherent reasonable doubt. Rebecca, thank you. Kurt, thank you for civil debate with my observations. Thank you. Thank you, Kurt. Indeed. Island, thank you. If jury hangs, will they retry before money trial? Nope, no chance.
Probably
JR,
not,
Bubba's the only reason we know Alex lied. A hero. Bubba and other stuff, but yes, Bubba. Justice for Bubba. Thank you, Chris. Cheryl, thank you very much. Drug-related hit. 3 shooters, 1 shotgun, feed room, 2 AR rifle to 1. 3 was behind where Maggie was. Otherwise, shell casing placement from ejection doesn't make sense. Ejections both left and right. We'll see the defense expert. I want to see him or her. JP, can Alex give permission to search his parents' property? They didn't suspect him until after several stories didn't match. No reason to search before. He can very much volunteer and ask his parents to volunteer, which I'm sure they would have for the police to take a look. They didn't even ask. That's the point. They didn't even ask. Ask. Or get a warrant. You have the person that's closest to the scene saying they went there. That's a phone call. 2 minutes. Lynn, if a hung jury can state change charge to conspiracy on a second go round, you can. It's subject to a lot of pitfalls from a practical level. I've talked about that on Peter's stream. Peter's talked about that. I think Kurt's talked about that. Adiba Zaman, thank you. Rob, is your birthday the first half of April? Nope, second half. Thank you very much. Nick Loss, thank you. An experienced and highly regarded tarot card reader would also be called an expert in their field, being that it doesn't mean it's a science. That is true, Nick Loss. Thank you. Math is math. There are certain things that we can say are experts. It doesn't always mean it's science. Nerding out, they have PM's phone, Paul Murdaugh's phone, but have not said if Snap video was streamed live or recorded. They did. They said it was recorded but not sent or streamed. That first video, that is. Or pulled metadata. The metadata request was interesting to me. The poor service, live unlikely. Poor service, if he records it, I don't know when the data tracks. The fact they didn't request it made me curious. I'm curious about that. Memphis Tiger, thank you. Apparently neither party's requested the court to invoke the sequestration rule. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It drives me crazy. Kanji Cosmos, thank you very much for the very generous super chat. Rihanna Randall, thank you. Love the commentary. Creighton kind of looks like Mark Hamill. I can see that. The Red Sarah, question, did they check flight plans? Am I crazy to think they could have used the airstrip to get in and out quickly? There would have been other people there. A couple of other people were in the immediate proximity that would have heard an airplane take off or land.
Maybe it was a silent plane.
I don't know. The sound would have woken not just that area up, but there were other caretakers nearby. Rebecca D, compare photo of Mallory Beach boyfriends to the suspect's pic Alex Murdaugh gave in the bogus roadside incident. I'm going to have to do that. Thank you, Rebecca. That's curious. Tanya Webster, thank you. Why wasn't Buster targeted if Paul and Maggie were? It doesn't make sense to me. Would love to hear your thoughts. Buster didn't really, Buster wasn't part of a lot of the bad stuff from what we know, other than giving the ID to Paul and the roadside incident. I don't know a lot about Buster. I thought that was a very effective question by the prosecutor at the very end. You never told them that Buster was at risk, right? You never feared that Buster was at risk, right? I thought that was great question to end that with. We're going to probably see that pick up tomorrow morning in that same vein. Christy Richardson, thank you very much. Even if they go for retrial, they'll still be stuck with a bad investigation. That's a true statement. Okay, everyone, thank you very much for tuning into this kind of impromptu recap, because I have to recap this stuff. Otherwise, like I said, when I tried to do a weekly recap the other week, goes on for 6 hours. This one went on for 2 hours and 45 minutes. And with all the developments this week, I would have lost my mind. So thank you for being here. Kurt, thank you for joining me. I very much appreciate you being here. As I said before, please go check out his channel. He does do great content. I look very much forward to seeing his review of the Supreme Court oral argument next week. Kurt, would you like to say goodbye to the chat?
Just, it's been a lot of fun chat. Really had a good time with you. Hope to see you over my channel. I will be resuming coverage when the defense case in chief starts. So if not tomorrow, then on Tuesday, because there's no court on Monday because federal holiday. So
Yep.
Either way, I look forward to seeing you then. So I'll do the back-to-back, and then we'll do some Supreme Court review, and we'll find time to do it all somewhere in there, only on Uncivil Law.
I love it. Before we duck out of here, I do want to thank Chuck Wilson for some gifted memberships. Barney Cat, thank you. I want to thank Brett Woodsheek for gifted memberships, as well as Courtney Michelle and Chris Mullen. Again, I much appreciate all of you being here and making the time to spend some time doing this little recap. I don't know that my opinions mean a whole lot. I do like sharing them with you guys because they are thoughts that I have to get out. Otherwise, they just boil up here until I go crazy. Adiba Zaman, April 21st-ish, Unscientific Tarot Reader. Not quite. Nurturing too. Forgive me if you're already responding to my questions. How do you dismiss the Kennel video and Alex at the scene of the crime and lied about it? It's a lie. The rest of the stuff has to make sense beyond any reasonable alternative to him pulling the triggers. That's where I get around it. Him pulling the triggers, washing off, no blood. It's the trigger pull. That's the part. Get me to him pulling the triggers, you're going to get me close. So, all right. Thank you guys very, very much. Kurt, again, thank you. I will see you guys next time. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and see you then.